Chapter 1. The inciting incident. I first became aware of the affair on an overcast October evening, when the fog settled like damp velvet against the windows of Grayford Manor. The ancient house, perched on a cliff above the channel, seemed to shudder in the chill breeze that whispered through its corridors. I was seated comfortably by the fire in the library, penning a letter to my brother, when a sharp knock interrupted my thoughts. "Enter," I called, expecting one of the servants. Instead, Hercule Poirot stepped into the lamplit room, his small form silhouetted against the murky outdoors. His keen grey eyes, those little grey cells in perpetual motion, betrayed an unusual gravity. In his gloved hand he held a telegram. "Mon ami," he began, unfolding the crisp paper, "we have been summoned to a very sinister occurrence at this estate. A gentleman lies dead, and something very odd was discovered beneath the flaking paint of the stairwell." His words, delivered in that precise, deliberate cadence, sent a shiver up my spine, not from fear, but from anticipation of the puzzle to come. Poirot's summons was never for idle curiosity. It meant tragedy, complication, and the subtle dance of deception. An hour later, we stood in the great hall of Grayford Manor. Dark panelling swallowed the corners. Portraits of stern ancestors glowered down from high frames. A grand staircase arched upward, its balustrade carved with fanciful birds and scrollwork. Yet, halfway up a flight of steps, the paint on the riser peeled and cracked, as if disturbed by unseen hands. Lady Cecilia Worthington, the mistress of the house, approached us in widow's weeds of deep violet. Her face was drawn, her eyes rimmed with tears, but she maintained the dignity expected of her station. "Lady Worthington," Poirot said softly, bowing, "permit me to offer condolences. May I inquire as to what exactly transpired here tonight?" Lady Worthington swallowed. "My husband, Sir Edmund, he was found at the foot of those stairs by my maid, Miss Barlow. At first we thought he had simply slipped, but then," her voice cracked, "but when we scraped back the paint, we found this blood." Poirot motioned to the footman, who carried a small tray. On it lay a thin wooden sliver of paint, curled where it had been lifted, and beneath it a bright, almost lurid smear of crimson. Inspector Mallory of the County Constabulary stood nearby, his tall form stiff with propriety. "This," Poirot murmured, examining it with a magnifying glass, "is not mere rust from iron. This is fresh blood, and it was carefully hidden by a hand that knew its secret." Inspector Mallory frowned. "You believe murder, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Evidement." He turned to me. "Mon ami, we must begin at once." Chapter 2. The first clues. The morning light filtered weakly through the heavy drapes of the library, casting long shadows across the Persian rug where I sat opposite Hercule Poirot. The little Belgian had already consumed his pot of tea-on-two plates of buttery biscuits, yet his eyes remained as bright and alert as ever. Between sips, he regarded me thoughtfully. "Mon ami," he said, "we must attend to the scene of the incident without delay. The hour grows precious." I rose and donned my overcoat. Outside, the crisp autumn air held a faint tang of salt from the nearby sea. We retraced our steps to the grand staircase. The household staff hovered near the foot of the stairs, exchanging hushed words. Miss Barlow, the maid who first discovered Sir Edmund's body, stood apart, wringing her hands. Poirot approached her gently. "Mademoiselle Barlow, I understand you were the first to find." He paused, choosing his words with care. "To find Lord Worthington this morning." The young woman's shoulders trembled. "Yes, monsieur. I came through early to prepare." His study. When I reached the landing, I saw him lying. There it looked as though he had fallen. She swallowed audibly. But the paint, the smudge under the paint, I thought I was wrong at first. Poirot inclined his head. And what other irregularities did you observe at the scene? Miss Barlow blinked, her eyes wide. Well, the night before, I heard voices in the corridor, low, heated tones. I did not stop to listen closely, but I thought it odd my lady was to host a supper party in the evening, and Lord Worthington seemed in good spirits. She glanced nervously at the assembled servants. Also, the lock on the library door was secured when I entered, yet I found it slightly ajar. Inspector Mallory stepped forward. The door was locked from inside. He asked, eyebrows raised. From the inside, sir, Miss Barlow confirmed. But there were no footsteps, on the landing only Sir Edmund's. Poirot's moustache twitched in a pleased manner. Excellent observation, mademoiselle. That shall prove indispensable. He turned to me. Note, Hastings, how the lock betrays an importunate hand, restless even in the night. We ascended the stairs once more, this time examining the individual risers. The paint on the fourth step was chipped, her slender crescent scraped away. Poirot knelt and pressed a gloved fingertip to the edge. Here, Hastings, feel the texture. See how the wood fibers are split, as if scraped by something thin and sharp. I ran my fingers along the edge. An implement, perhaps a knife, but surely a knife would leave a deeper gouge. Ah, but consider the leverage, Poirot mused. A slender tool, perhaps a small screwdriver or the tip of a letter opener, used with utmost care. And see here. He produced a magnifying glass and examined a fleck of something dark lodged in the crack. A fragment of dark cloth almost. Certainly a thread from a garment. Inspector Mallory crouched beside us. A thread from the victim's coat, perhaps. Poirot shook his head. No, no, the weave is too fine. This belongs to a heavier fabric, very likely a servant's livery. He peered upward. The smudge of blood beneath the paint overlay suggests deliberate concealment. We must discover who had cause to approach this very spot after the deed was done. Nearby, the butler, Mr. Grafton, hovered with measured restraint. Poirot summoned him. Monsieur Grafton, as you are the head of staff, tell us, who among you had occasion to be in this corridor last night after dinner? Mr. Grafton cleared his throat. Only the housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers, and Miss Barlow, Your Excellency. Lady Worthington withdrew early with a headache, and the rest of us retired to our duties elsewhere. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And Mrs. Danvers, where is she now? The butler pointed down the hallway. She is in the linen room, sir, preparing the day's service. Shall I fetch her? Indeed, Poirot replied. We must speak with her. We followed Mr. Grafton to a corner of the manor, where the linen room smelled of starch and lavender. There, Mrs. Danvers, a stout woman in prim grey, arranged folded sheets on oak shelves. Monsieur Poirot, she said with a curt nod. I trust you have arrived as early as usual. Poirot bowed. Madame, you have the reputation of impeccable order. I require your assistance. Did you notice anything unusual last night? Knee sounds or movements in the corridor near the staircase? Mrs. Danvers folded another sheet crisply. I heard nothing until Monsieur Grafton's shout at dawn. The corridors are quiet after lights out. It is our custom to remain below stairs unless summoned. Poirot pursed his lips. Yet the paint on the stairwell was disturbed after the body was placed. That implies someone crossed the corridor, barefoot or gloved, to smuggle a note or an instrument. Mrs. Danvers's expression faltered, a brief flicker of unease. I cannot imagine who would do such a thing. As the housekeeper spoke, Poirot's gaze drifted to a tall grandfather clock in the hallway. Inspector, take note of the time on that clock as compared to the village records. If the clock stopped at any point, it may indicate interference. Inspector Mallory consulted his notebook. The clock registered no stoppage. It struck 3 in the morning when I tested it. Interesting, Poirot murmured. A narrow window, indeed. He rose and beckoned me onward. Come, Hastings. Let us examine the crime scene more closely. We returned to the staircase. Where Poirot knelt by the paint fragment, he pointed upward to a narrow slit between balusters. Hastings observed the mating surfaces. The paint here was scraped twice, once from the faint fragment we removed, and again from this opposite edge, where there is also a faint red tinge. This suggests the object was slid through that aperture concealed momentarily, then retrieved. I glanced through the gap and saw a small niche in the plaster, a shallow hollow. Aha! Something could have been hidden there. Precisely. Poirot said, his eyes alight. A note, perhaps, or a key. We must discover what lies within. He placed a gloved hand against the wall, pressing gently. A slight give in the plaster revealed a concealed panel. With the tip of a trowel borrowed from the housekeeper, Poirot opened it to reveal a folded scrap of parchment. I unwound the paper and read the hurried script. Beware the calm facade. Blood flows where arrogance meets envy. Poirot folded the parchment carefully. A warning or a confession disguised as riddle. Remarkable, he regarded the assembled staff. Who among you speaks in cryptic verse? No one answered. The inspector frowned. The writing is spidery female handwriting, I should say. Possibly, Poirot conceded, but do not be swayed by assumption. I observe traces of black ink, not common in a gentleman's study, but favoured by ladies who enjoy writing letters by candlelight. Yet the paper itself is coarse, more like a servant's ledger. I inspected the scrap more closely, and the ink has bled in places, as though the writer's hands trembled. Exactly, Poirot said, pocketing the parchment. Our mystery deepens. Hastings, servants or masters, laymen or society. Ladies all may be implicated. We have clues. The disturbed paint, the hidden note, the locked door. Now we must piece them together. He rose and brushed dust from his sleeve. Return to Lady Worthington. We shall interview each of the principal guests who attended the supper last evening. Each carries secrets, and each may hold a key to this enigmatic affair. As we departed the staircase, I sensed Poirot's excitement. The first clues had been uncovered, yet the heart of the mystery still lay hidden somewhere within the walls of Grayford Manand, within the hearts of those who dwelt there. Chapter 3. The Gathering of Suspects. By late morning, the grand salon had been prepared for interviews. The tall windows were propped open to admit a chilly breeze, and the afternoon light revealed the intricate patterns of the damask wallpaper. A semicircle of chairs faced the hearth, where Poirot and I took seats on a low settee, our notebooks at the ready. One by one, the guests from last night's supper were summoned, those who, like Sir Edmund Worthington, had walked the same corridors on the eve of tragedy. Lady Worthington, first to enter, was Lady Cecilia Worthington herself. Clad in a simple black gown trimmed with lavender, she carried herself with a dignified composure that barely concealed her grief. She paused at the threshold, smoothing her hair as though she were performing a ritual of self-control. Poirot inclined his head. "Lady Worthington," he said, with his customary courtesy, "thank you for granting us your time. Will you recount for us the events of last evening's supper, who was present, and anything you found unusual?" Lady Worthington's voice was soft but steady. "We dined at 8. Present were my cousin, Miss Eleanor Vale, Colonel Grantham, Dr. Oliver Sinclair, Mr. Maurice Shappan, and, of course, Sir Edmund and myself. The conversation was pleasant at first. Sir Edmund raised a toast to the manor's restoration. Yet I sensed tension between him and Colonel Grantham over a matter of money. The Colonel spoke of loans and obligations, and Sir Edmund's face darkened. I made a note. Tension over finances between victim and Colonel. Poirot stroked his moustache, eyes intent, and after dinner, Poirot prompted. Lady Worthington hesitated. Sir Edmund withdrew to his study with Dr. Sinclair to discuss arrangements for his upcoming shipment of antiquities. The rest of us lingered in the drawing-room. I bade everyone good night at 10, then retired early with a headache. She paused, her gaze drifting to the fire. I did not hear anything until Miss Barlow's shriek at dawn. Miss Eleanor Vale. Next came Miss Vale, a tall, austere woman in grey silk, her dark hair coiled at the nape of her neck. She bore the demeanour of a governess, austere yet observant. She sank into a chair, hands folded in her lap. Miss Vale. Poirot began, "You are Lady Worthington's cousin and long-time friend. Did you notice anything amiss at supper?" Miss Vale's thin lips curved slightly. Sir Edmund seemed distracted. He spoke little after the toast. I attempted light conversation, but he replied curtly. Later, I saw him glancing anxiously toward the corridor outside the dining room, his expression one of dread, perhaps. She shivered, though the room was warm. He wrung his hands and muttered about a shipment arriving prematurely. "A shipment," Poirot murmured, scribbling. "What kind of shipment?" "Antiquities," she said. "Sir Edmund deals in rare artifacts. He feared a crate had gone missing. He asked Dr. Sinclair to confirm its arrival." Miss Vale's eyes flicked upward. When he spoke to Dr. Sinclair, the doctor's face turned ashen. I assumed it was professional concern. "Colonel Grantham." Colonel Sir Henry Grantham strode in next, his military bearing undiminished by the events of the night. His uniform was now civilian, but his posture remained erect. He nodded curtly at Poirot. "Colonel," Poirot said, "you and Sir Edmund had matters to discuss." Grantham's jaw tightened. "Indeed, Sir Edmund owes me a substantial sum, dating back to a business venture in Egypt. He promised repayment upon sale of certain relics. When the crates failed to arrive on schedule, I pressed him for answers." "Did you threaten him?" Poirot asked quietly. The Colonel bristled. "Threaten? No. I reminded him of his duty. I have no wish to harm anyone, but he must honour his agreements." I noted the Colonel's clipped tone, frustration, perhaps bitterness. Poirot's gaze remained fixed. Dr. Oliver Sinclair. Dr. Sinclair entered with visible reluctance. Adjusting his pince-nez, his scholarly robes were pressed, though his tie was slightly askew. He gave Poirot a curt bow. Dr. Poirot said, "You were alone with Sir Edmund in his study." "Alone, except for his servant. Yes," Dr. Sinclair admitted. "I came to catalogue the artifacts, but he seemed distressed. He insisted I open and inspect each crate, though he had already signed off on the inventory." "Why?" Poirot inquired. Sinclair ran a hand through his fine hair. "He said he feared forgery someone might have swapped a genuine piece for a fake. When I began examining the crates, I found one partially opened and resealed. I questioned him, but he dismissed my concerns. He swallowed. I did not see him again after I left the study around 9:30. Poirot leaned forward. And what became of the crate? Dr. Sinclair frowned. It remains in the study. I did not have time to finish inspection. I glanced at Poirot, intrigued by the possibility that the victim had discovered tampering before his death. Mr. Maurice Chupin, the final interviewee, was Mr. Chupin, a suave gentleman in evening dress, his dark eyes alert. He sat with one leg crossed, offering a thin-lipped smile. Monsieur Chupin, Poirot said, "You are an associate of Sir Edmund's in the antiquities trade." Chupin nodded. We partnered on several auctions. He provided the artifacts. I handled marketing. Our arrangement was lucrative, yet I understand there were disagreements. Poirot prompted. Chupin shrugged. Minor differences in appraisal values. He undervalued pieces. I lost potential profit. I pressed him to be more realistic. He refused. Poirot's moustache twitched. "Did you waive the prospect of legal action?" Chapin's smile faltered. I suggested it, but I withdrew when he became agitated. I left the estate shortly after. Midnight, alone, Poirot asked. Chapin's gaze remained steady. Alone, I walked to the gate. No one followed me. Subtle foreshadowing as the last guest departed, Poirot rose slowly and paced before the hearth. His expression was contemplative. Observe, Hastings, the web of motives, financial debts, tampered shipments, and personal affronts. Each of our suspects possessed reason to wish Sir Edmund Harmore at least inconvenience. He returned to the settee and picked up a small leather case. I requested these case notes from Inspector Mallory. He clicked it open to reveal photographs, and one curious fact emerges. The crate found damaged bears Lady Worthington's seal, not Sir Edmund's. Why would her seal appear on goods under his shipment? Lady Worthington's seal indicated her fiscal involvement. Poirot's eyes glittered. This suggests Lady Worthington has financial stake in the artifacts, possibly as guarantor of her husband's loans to Colonel Grantham, or as investor alongside Chupin. He tapped the photos. Furthermore, Miss Vale's observation of whispered voices and her devotion to her cousin hint that she knows more than she reveals. Dr. Sinclair's discovery of a wild crate implies knowledge of forgery, and Colonel Grantham's insistence on repayment suggests desperation. Our suspects are not idle parties, they are active players. I jotted down Poirot's deductions. And what of the hidden note? The one about envy and arrogance. Poirot smiled thinly. A servant's warning or a lady's irony? We shall see. For now, we have sufficient reason to proceed with deeper interviews, examining private motives. But before that, Hastings, you must accompany me to the study. I wish to analyze the crate itself and determine precisely what was concealed or altered. As we departed the salon, I reflected on the scene, a house poised between genteel society and hidden resentments. Each guest had offered a fragment of truth, yet each had also concealed a deeper secret. The gathering of suspects had illuminated the intricate connections, binding them to Sir Edmund, and had set the stage for further revelations yet to come. Chapter 4. Poirot inspects the crate, the study of Sir Edmund. Worthington was a hushed sanctuary of mahogany bookcases, leather-bound tomes, and the lingering scent of cigar smoke. Early afternoon light slanted through tall windows, illuminating motes of dust that danced above the Persian rug. Poirot paused. At the threshold, his moustache quivering in anticipation. "Observe, Hastings," he said, removing a silk handkerchief to dust the top of Sir Edmund's writing desk. "This room is a portrait of control. Every item, books, papers, cabinets, placed with precision. Yet there lies our first discordance. The crate." He led me to a stout oak case resting against the far wall. The crate's outer band bore Lady Worthington's seal, but the wood around its edges was scuffed and faintly gouged, as though something had pried it open and forced it back. Poirot knelt and ran a fingertip along a seam. "See here, mon ami, the split in the grain is fresh. The seal was applied later, with care to conceal tampering. And the nails one appears newer than the rest." I crouched beside him. "So someone reopened the crate after Lady Worthington sealed it." Poirot nodded gravely. "Or someone procured a duplicate seal. We must determine which." He then drew a small brush from his pocket and gently swept away a fine layer of dust around the crate's latch. Underneath, minute fragments of wood and varnish collected in his dustpan evidence. He said, of hurried resealing. He rose and retrieved a letter opener from the desk, its silver handle engraved with Sir Edmund's initials. "This implement bears unusual markings," he observed, tapping its blade against the crate. "The edge has tiny chips. I suspect it was used to part the crate's panels." He held it aloft to the light. "Moreover, see these faint stains, dark and oily. Not blood, but perhaps shellac or shipping grease mixed with something organic." Poirot set the opener down and retrieved a small kit of reagents from his case. With careful drops, he tested the stains, watching their reaction. "Hastings, you see how the spot darkens. That is tannic acid reacting. Likely from leather perhaps, a fragment of Sir Edmund's spare gloves, or a leather-bound journal." I watched the liquid bead and fade. So the crate was reopened not only to hide something but to insert an object, maybe that journal. "Indeed," Poirot murmured, "or to remove it. But note, the inner lid shows no signs of forced entry. Only the outer panels were disturbed." He unfolded a cloth on the desk and set the letter opener upon it. "I believe the culprit is intimately familiar with this room. A stranger might leave more obvious traces: dust, displacement, scuff marks, footprints. But here, everything else remains untouched." We turned our attention to the crate's lock. It was an old-fashioned brass clasp, now bent slightly inward. Poirot produced a pair of pliers and eased the clasp open, then swung back the lid. Inside lay velvet-lined compartments, each cradling an artifact: a carved ivory figurine, a gilded chalice, and several loose sheets of parchment bearing ancient script. But one compartment lay empty, its velvet interior cleaved where something had sat. "Notice the depression here, Hastings. Something roughly the size of a small tome was removed." Poirot gingerly lifted each artifact, inspecting them for hidden compartments or damage. He paused at the chalice. "This vessel appears genuine, though someone has polished it recently. Yet the ivory figurine has a hairline fracture that seems fresh." He tapped it lightly, producing a barely audible ping. "A restoration would require expert hands-on time." "What of the parchments?" I asked, gesturing to the sheets. Poirot examined the script with his magnifying glass. "These are genuine letters from a 16th century merchant, valuable indeed. But note the sudden irregularity of ink on the last sheet. One line is written in a different hand, smaller and more precise." I leaned closer. "It reads, 'The truth lies beneath the painted steps. Poirot's eyes gleamed, a direct reference to our earlier discovery. The culprit marked the victim's home with a clue or a taunt. He replaced the artifacts and closed the lid. Our suspect wanted Sir Edmund to find the note under the stairs, perhaps to scare him, yet not kill him outright. Then something went awry. He stood, pressing a fingertip to his lips. We must ascertain the timeline. When was the crate last opened legitimately? According to Mrs. Danvers, the delivery arrived before dinner, yet the inscription on the docket indicates arrival at 8:30. Too late for the initial discussion between Sir Edmund and Dr. Sinclair. I scribbled in my notebook, "Delivery time discrepancy." Poirot continued, "Either the docket is falsified, or someone altered it after the fact. We must consult the ledger in the study, Sir Edmund's personal journal of shipments." He strode to the desk and opened a drawer labelled Worthington and Co. Inside lay a leather-bound account book. Poirot leafed through entries, his eyes narrowing. "Aha," he said, examining an inked line. "Delivery recorded on October 5th yet. This is the 6th. The entries around it are smudged. Someone tried to erase the date." And here he tapped a footnote. "An unusual surcharge for expedited shipping, £14 sterling. This confirms our suspect bribed a courier." I looked up. Which of the suspects could afford such a bribe? "Colonel Grantham," Poirot replied immediately. "He has the means and motive. But the surcharge might also implicate Chopin, who stands to lose marketing profits if artifacts are delayed." He closed the ledger. "We now know that the crate was tampered both to conceal a warning and to remove an item important enough to involve bribery. But what of that item? I suspect a private letter, perhaps one exposing a secret relationship or illicit transaction." Poirot tucked the ledger under his arm. "Hastings, we shall confront our suspects anew. But first, we must verify one more detail." He produced his pocket watch. The voices Miss Barlow heard, the heated tones in the corridor, could they correspond to a conversation here in the study? He pressed his ear to the door and then to the keyhole. At approximately 9:10, voices in low tones. "I suspect Lady Worthington returned here after retiring, either to speak with Sir Edmund or to retrieve something from this room." I frowned. "But Lady Worthington said she went straight to her chambers." "Either she lies," Poirot said quietly, "or her actions were not authorized. We must verify her alibi and examine her key, which grants private access to this study." He turned to the desk and lifted a small key ring marked Greyford keys. Among them hung a delicate key with Lady Worthington's crest. Poirot held it up. "This key opens the inner cabinet." He removed a small panel to reveal a hidden safe, where Sir Edmund kept his most confidential papers. He inserted the key and turned it. The safe door clicked open. Inside lay an assortment of personal letters, including one sealed with Lady Worthington's monogram. Poirot extracted it and cracked the wax. The letter inside was brief, written in a steady hand. "Meet me once more at the stairs, lest your foolish pride undo us both." Poirot folded the letter and placed it gently on the desk. A rendezvous at the flaking stairwell painted just before the murder. Someone enticed Sir Edmund there under false pretenses. He clasped his hands behind his back. "We have unravelled motives, timelines, and secret correspondences. Yet the identity of the one who orchestrated this deadly trap remains hidden. Our next step is to assemble all suspects in the drawing room so that Poirot's little grey cells may arrange the final pieces." With that, He tucked the letter into his breast pocket and signaled for Mrs. Danvers to clear the desk. As I followed him from the study, I felt a mounting excitement. The investigation had truly entered its pivotal phase, and Poirot's brilliance would soon illuminate the murderer. Chapter 5. Initial interviews. Begin late afternoon. Found the drawing room transformed into a chamber of inquiry. Heavy damask curtains were drawn against the fading light, and the flicker of candelabra cast dancing shadows upon the floral carpets. Poirot arranged 5 chairs in a semicircle, each spaced precisely as though setting the stage for some tribunal of conscience. I sat nearby with my notebook, ready to record every nuance of expression. Mise Miss Poirot announced, in a voice both inviting and authoritative. We shall begin with our first interviews. One by one, you will answer my questions. Speak truthfully, for I shall observe not only your words, but the silences between them. He beckoned Lady Cecilia Worthington forward. She rose, smoothing her violet skirts, and took her place in the nearest chair. Poirot offered her a porcelain cup of tea, which she accepted with unsteady hands. Lady Worthington, he began, you told us you retired early due to a headache, yet we know you returned to this study later that night. Pray, explain your movements between 10 o'clock and midnight. Lady Worthington's lips parted, her colour rising. Monsieur Poirot, She drew a breath. I confess, I left my chambers to retrieve Sir Edmund's spectacles. He misplaced them before retiring and wished to continue reading. I thought it a trivial errand. Her voice wavered. I did not see him again after I placed the glasses on his desk. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. And did you notice anyone else in the corridor at that hour? Any light under the door of the study? She paused, brow furrowing. I heard voices, low and hurried, then silence. I knocked once, as was my habit, but there was no reply. I assumed Sir Edmund had gone to bed. She clasped her hands. I did not linger. Poirot's gaze lingered on her. Yet the lock bore signs of having been engaged and disengaged repeatedly. One would not knock upon an empty room so insistently. He tapped his temple, curious. Lady Worthington looked down, unable to meet his eyes. Poirot made a small note and motioned her back to her place. Next, Miss Eleanor Vale approached. Her austere facade seemed more brittle now, her dark eyes hooded with fatigue. Poirot regarded her keenly. Miss Vale, he said, you are intimately familiar with Lady Worthington's moods and schedules. You assisted with tonight's supper and later remained in the drawing room. Why did you not stay closer to the study, given Sir Edmund's reported concerns over the shipment? Miss Vale's thin lips tightened. Monsieur, I had retired too. Prepare Lady Worthington's correspondence. I did not think to remain near Sir Edmund. He and Dr. Sinclair appeared occupied in private matters. She swallowed. I heard no cries, only a faint scraping sound like metal upon wood before dawn. Poirot inclined his head, a sound reported by Miss Barlow as well. Yet Miss Barlow was stationed at the landing. You were not. How did you discern the same noise? Miss Vale's composure flickered. I awoke briefly. The castle is thin-walled. I perceived it in my chamber. She paused, but I saw no one there. Thank you, Poirot said, returning her to the group. Colonel Sir Henry Grantham rose. Next, his military bearing remained unshaken, but his eyes were guarded. Colonel, Poirot pronounced, you admit to pressing Sir Edmund for repayment of a debt. Yet this debt was secured by the artifacts themselves. If the crates were delayed, your leverage would vanish. Did you threaten Sir Edmund in a manner beyond mere words? Grantham's jaw set. I reminded him of our pact. I did not threaten his life, monsieur. I have honor. Poirot's moustache twitched. Honor does not preclude desperate measures, especially when large sums are at stake. Explain the surcharge recorded in Sir Edmund's ledger, £14 for expedited shipping. Who authorized that? You or Mr. Chapin, the colonel's? Brows rose. I did not. I doubt Maurice Chapin did. Only Sir Edmund or his wife could authorize such an expense. He stared at Lady Worthington, then turned his gaze away. Poirot made a small notation. Dr. Oliver Sinclair was called forward, adjusting his pince-nez with deliberate slowness. Dr. Poirot said suavely, "You discovered one crate partially, opened and resealed. You did not inform Sir Edmund of your suspicion immediately." "Why?" Dr. Sinclair cleared his throat. "I did voice my concerns, but he dismissed them. He was uneasy about the crates and feared scandal more than theft." He paused. I ought to have insisted. I did not wish to insult him by implying. He had overlooked tampering. Poirot raised a gloved finger. "And did you witness any interaction between Sir Edmund and Lady Worthington or Miss Vale after their departure from the study?" The doctor hesitated. "I thought I heard Lady Worthington's voice at a distance, soft, pleading. But it may have been the wind." He rubbed his temple. "My recollection is not precise." Poirot's eyes bored into his. "Yet your memory is sharper when discussing artifacts versus human behavior." He leaned back. Remarkable. Finally, Mr. Maurice Chapin settled into the empty chair. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes darted furtively about the room. "Monsieur Chapin," Poirot began, "you left the manor at midnight. Why so late? And why did you not inform the staff of your departure?" Chapin swallowed. "I walked across the grounds to clear my head. The estate is safe. I needed fresh air. I did not think to disturb the household." He offered a tight smile. "I returned before dawn, only to find the tragedy." Poirot tapped his lip. "And yet you informed no one of your whereabouts. No one could verify your claim." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Were you perhaps aware that Sir Edmund had learned of your profit losses and confronted you privately?" Chapin's face tightened. "He spoke of recalculating my share in the auction proceeds. I admit we exchanged heated words, but I left amicably." Poirot's eyes glittered. "Amicably until the crate bearing your marketing identity failed to impress adduction. Then embers of resentment may have burned bright." Chapin's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Poirot closed his notebook and rose, signaling the end of the round. "Ms. Amos," he said, "thank you for your candor. We shall pause here, for I must examine your statements for inconsistencies. Hastings, bring me the transcript of last night's supper menu and the guest list." As I hurried from the room, Poirot addressed the assembled circle. "Remain here. I may require your presence again. And remember, even the calmest facade may conceal a storm." He sank into a chair, steepling his fingers. "Now, Hastings, let us compare their testimonies to the physical evidence. Note their body language, the tense glances exchanged, each a crack in the veneer." I returned with the documents, and together we pored over them by candlelight. The first interviews had yielded contradictions and subtle tremors of guilt, yet the murderer's identity remained concealed, deep beneath layered motives and misdirection. The game was afoot, and Poirot's little grey cells had begun their most challenging work. Ile twilight had descended upon Greyford Manor when Inspector Mallory summoned us to the library, where a long mahogany table bore an array of glassware and porcelain. The servants hovered anxiously at the edges of the room, their faces pale in the glow of a single shaded lamp. Poirot stood before the display, steepling his fingers with that characteristic poise. "Mise, amice," began the inspector grimly. "We have uncovered evidence of attempted poisoning at last night's supper. The port served with the consomme contains traces of digitalis." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled staff. Lady Worthington pressed a gloved hand to her lips, her eyes wide with shock. Miss Barlow clutched her apron, and even the steadfast Mrs. Danvers trembled slightly. Poirot's expression, however, remained inscrutable. "Digitalis," he mused, tapping the crystal carafe with a slender cane. "A noble poison, subtle and slow-acting." He turned to Mallory. "And you attribute its presence to a deliberate act, not a cross-contamination?" Inspector Mallory nodded. "The laboratory confirms it. Moreover, Dr. Oliver Sinclair was seen handling Lady Worthington's teacup earlier in the evening, perhaps under the guise of gentlemanly courtesy, but with the opportunity to slip the drug into her glass." All eyes shifted to Dr. Sinclair, who stood rigidly by the mantel, pince-nez perched on his nose. His scholarly composure cracked for a heartbeat, and he coughed lightly. This is preposterous," he exclaimed. "My medical studies include digitalis as a treatment for heart conditions. I carry it for emergencies, not maleficence." He wrung his hands. "I admit having the vials in my coat pocket, but I would never endanger Lady Worthington or anyone." Inspector Mallory raised a hand. "Your explanations will be heard in due course. For now, you are under arrest for attempted murder." Handcuffs clicked around Dr. Sinclair's wrists. He glanced at Poirot, desperation in his eyes. "Hercule, you must intervene." Poirot allowed the scene to unfold, his slight smile hidden beneath his moustache. Once Sinclair was led away, he turned to me. "Mon ami, observe how quickly the mind leaps to obvious culpability when faced with fear. Yet fear often obscures the truth." I frowned, but the evidence seems damning. Digitalis in the port, Sinclair's proximity to Lady Worthington's glass. What other explanation exists? Poirot picked up the porcelain teacup from the table and turned it deftly in his gloved hands. "Notice the lip of the cup. There are no drips or stains where the dye of digitalis would pool. Furthermore, consider the timing," the porter reported. "The flask to have only 2 servings remaining, yet we counted 3 guests at that service." I peered at the cup, then at the carafe. "You mean someone drank more than their share or topped up an empty glass?" "Precisely," Poirot said, replacing the cup. "But more importantly, the code of practice for the servants is to rinse glassware thrice in boiled water. If digitalis had been poured, minute traces would cling beneath the lip, yet I find none." Inspector Mallory interjected. "Monsieur Poirot, the laboratory test is beyond question." "Laboratory tests," Poirot replied, "are only as reliable as their samples. I have reason to believe that the sample taken was not from the port at supper, but from a different bottle." He indicated a slender corked vial on the mantel. "Voisin & Co. Digitalis tincture," the brand supplied to Dr. Sinclair by his own physician. "Its label matches the chemical signature found in the analysis." Mallory's brow furrowed. "You suggest our chemist tested Sinclair's personal tincture, not the port?" Poirot nodded. "A cunning device. Plant the phial among the evidence. Divert suspicion from the true culprit." He turned to me and whispered, "We must examine the cook's pantry." Moments later, with Mallory reluctantly in tow, we entered the scullery. The cook, Mrs. Pearson, stood by a wooden dresser laden with jars, utensils, and the detritus of meal preparation. She clutched her apron as if seeking comfort. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, "I require your assistance. Show me the port you used for last night's supper." Mrs. Pearson led us to a stout oak chest deep in the pantry. She lifted its lid to reveal several bottles, each labelled with the manor's crest. Poirot selected one, lifting it to the light. "Notice," he said, tapping the cork, "this stopper is warped, and its seal bears the imprint of a second emblem and co-purveyors in Dover." He pried off the cork and poured a small measure into a saucer. "Observe the colour, richer, darker, almost viscous compared to the port served at supper." I sniffed it cautiously. "I detect a faint bitterness, almost medicinal." "Oui," Poirot said, nodding. "This is where the test sample originated, from the genuine port, but from an illicit bottle introduced after supper concluded." He placed the saucer on a shelf. Our culprit intended to implicate Dr. Sinclair, knowing his medicinal tincture would match the spiked port. But they did not anticipate that I would compare the actual port to the sample. A cry came from the doorway, Miss Barlow's pale face framed by the dim light. "Monsieur Poirot, Lady Worthington's tea has been found in the garden." We dashed outside to the rose garden, where a porcelain teapot lay askew on a stone bench. Its spout bore the manor's crest. Nearby, crumpled beneath a climbing rose, lay a slip of paper. "Truth is distilled in shadow, but poison leaves no friend behind." Lady Worthington knelt to retrieve the teapot. Her gloves trembled as she lifted its lid to reveal a residue of dark liquid. Poirot examined it with his magnifying glass. "This teapot was exchanged moments ago," he announced. "The original rinsed clean was hidden under the bench." He pointed to a concealed compartment carved into the stone, a perfect staging ground for a scene of guilt. Inspector Mallory's face darkened in realization. "So Sinclair is innocent of attempted poisoning." Poirot inclined his head. "He was a convenient scapegoat. We must apologize at once, then release him." The inspector hurried back inside, leaving Poirot and me alone in the fragrant gloom of the roses. I surveyed the overturned pot and the slip of paper. "Another cryptic warning," I said, this time addressed to Lady Worthington. Poirot pocketed the note. "Yes, and the message is twofold. Accuse one suspect to conceal the truth, then misdirect again with ominous verse. The real murderer wishes us distracted by theatrics." He turned to me, eyes gleaming. "Now, mon ami, we pursue the true trail. Our false lead has served its purpose. It revealed the cunning and desperation at work. But beware, the murderer will now change tactics. We must be ready." As we retraced our steps toward the manor, I felt the thrill of the chase intensify. The first false lead had been struck down, but a deeper, more dangerous game was afoot, a game only. Poirot's little grey cells could be trusted to win. Chapter 7. The psychological game night had fallen once more over Greyford Manor, its turrets and gables etched starkly against a moonlit sky. Inside the drawing-room, Poirot stood before the hearth, its embers long since dimmed, arranging papers on a side table. The atmosphere was charged with unspoken tensioner, household on edge, uncertain where their next move would come. "Mise." Miss Poirot began, addressing the assembled suspects. "We have dispelled the illusion of poisoning, yet the true poison remains among us, fear. Tonight we shall play a psychological game." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I will pose proposition scenarios for reflection. I ask each of you to respond, honestly and without hesitation. Lady Cecilia Worthington's eyes widened, but she remained seated. Miss Eleanor Vale, Colonel Grantham, and Mr. Maurice Chupin exchanged wary glances. Even Mrs. Danvers stood at attention by the door, her hands clasped tightly. Poirot turned to Lady Worthington first. Imagine that, in the dark of night, you discovered a dagger hidden beneath the paint of the stairwell. What would you do? Lady Worthington's throat bobbed as she swallowed. I would inform Sir Edmund at once, or summon assistance. One does not confront a weapon alone. Her voice was steady, but her cheeks were flushed. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. And if the dagger had your husband's monogram engraved upon it, implying he planted it himself, how would you proceed? Lady Worthington's composure trembled. She glanced at Colonel Grantham, then at Dr. Sinclair, and back to Poirot. I would believe he wished to frighten me, but then I would question his motives. She placed a hand over her heart. I would demand an explanation. Poirot made a precise note. Thank you, my lady. He then faced Miss Vale. Miss Vale, if you witnessed a servant slipping a key through the banister key to the hidden safe, what would you feel? Miss Vale's lips pursed. Alarm, certainly. A servant would have no business near that safe. I would suspect subterfuge either to conceal evidence or to steal. She folded her arms. I would report it immediately. Yet if the key matched Lady Worthington's crest, Poirot pressed. Miss Vale hesitated. Then I would assume my cousin wished to access those papers herself. She looked down, perhaps to retrieve a letter she regretted writing. Poirot glanced at Lady Worthington, whose expression was inscrutable. He jotted another note, turning to Colonel Grantham. Poirot asked, Sir Henry, if you learned that your creditor had concealed a substantial inheritance enough to cover the debt, how might you feel? The Colonel's jaw clenched. He leaned forward, betrayed. I would feel foolish for pressing him so harshly, and perhaps angry at being misled. He ran a hand through his hair. I would demand restitution and an apology. Poirot's eyes flicked to Sir Henry's neatly polished boots. Would you seek revenge if your pride were hurt? Grantham stiffened. Not revenge, but justice. His gaze hardened. I would want fairness restored. The detective allowed the silence to stretch before moving on. Lastly, he confronted Maurice Chupin. Mr. Chupin, suppose you learned that the market value of your prized artifacts had been undermined by forgeries you unwittingly sold. What would you do? Chupin exhaled slowly. I would be furious for my reputation and finances. I would track down the source of those forgeries and hold them accountable. He tapped his fingers on the arm of his chair. I would fear ruin. Poirot held his gaze. And what if the forgeries were introduced by your partner, Sir Edmund, who then blamed you for the discrepancy? Chapin's face flushed. He looked away for the first time. I would feel betrayed. He cleared his throat. And I might act to prevent further loss, perhaps, by taking matters into my own hands. Poirot's moustache quivered in delight. He folded his hands. Excellent. You have spoken freely, each revealing your deepest reactions to imagined betrayals. Yet our real betrayal occurred here, under this roof. He stepped back and addressed all present. I posed scenarios to see who would respond with unguarded emotion. Notice how Mr. Chupin spoke of acting on anger. Colonel Grantham threatened justice born of wounded pride. Miss Vale imagined protecting her cousin's secrets. Lady Worthington feared being frightened by her husband. He paused, letting each suspect absorb their own words. Poirot then produced a small mirror from his pocket. Now, each of you will gaze upon your reflection and recall what you just revealed." He held the mirror before Lady Worthington. "Look deeply, my lady. What truth do you see?" Lady Worthington's breath caught. She stared at her reflection, lips pressed in a firm line. After a moment, she lowered the mirror. "I see a wife torn between love and suspicion," nodded approvingly and passed the mirror to Miss Vale. The governess regarded herself coolly. A cousin, protector, she might think, yet fear lurks behind that courage. Miss Vale's brow furrowed, but she said nothing to Grantham. The colonel inspected himself, shoulders stiff. Honor-bound soldier or a man driven by wounded pride, he murmured. Grantham's jaw clenched anew. Finally, Chopin took the mirror. He studied his eyes, murmuring, ruthless ambition or desperate preservation. His lips tightened, and he set the mirror down with a deliberate click. Poirot surveyed their reactions. "By provoking your deepest fears and motivations, I observe who falters under the weight of guilt. Note who averts their gaze, who trembles, and who stiffens in anger." He leaned forward. "The true culprit will have revealed themselves, by words, but by the tremor of the heart." He pocketed the mirror and looked to me. "Hastings, record their reactions. Then fetch me that scrap of parchment found beneath the stairs, the one about arrogance and envy." As I retraced my steps to the staircase, I sensed that Poirot's psychological game had already planted seeds of doubt among the suspects. Each had shown a crack in their facada moments, where their internal turmoil betrayed deeper secrets. Now, as I handed him the parchment, I understood. Paul Ricker might have called it truth revealing itself in the gesture, but to it was evidency mosaic of human emotion leading inexorably toward the murderer's identity. And so the game continued, shadows lengthening around us, each suspect a pawn in Poirot's intricate mind game. The next move would be decisive, but only the little grey cells could divine when and where. Chapter 8. A secondary mystery. The hush of Pradon settled over Greyford Manor as I made my way to the library. The flickering gaslight cast elongated shadows along the book-lined walls, and the air smelled of old paper and wood polish. I found Poirot already there, standing before the now empty safe, his expression contemplative. "Hastings," he said without turning, "something else has occurred, a secondary mystery, if you will." I felt a sudden tension in my shoulders. "What is it, Hercule?" He motioned me closer to the open cabinet where Sir Edmund's most confidential papers had been stored. "Last night, after our psychological game, I instructed Mrs. Danvers to secure the safe. Yet, when she came to retrieve the journals, this morning, this letter was missing." Poirot held out a small envelope embossed with Lady Worthington's crest. The seal was broken, the flap askew. I took it, noting the elegant handwriting. "Midnight at the landing. Find the truth where paint peels away." I looked up at Poirot. The very message we found hidden beneath the stairwell, paint only now addressed to someone else. He nodded. "Precisely. The murderer has escalated from cryptic warnings to an act of theft. Someone has stolen the final missive intended for Sir Edmund. We must locate it." At that moment, Mrs. Danvers entered, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, the key to Lady Worthington's private desk has also vanished, and Miss Barlow reports her journal missing from the maid's quarters." Poirot's keen eyes glinted. A trifecta of disappearances. A letter, a key, and a journal, all connected to the stairwell clue. He turned to us both. "Fetch Inspector Mallory and Lady Worthington at once." Moments later, the inspector strode in, his notebook clasped tightly. Lady Worthington followed her violet gown hastily, arranged her composure strained. Poirot presented the facts succinctly. Someone among us has taken these items to conceal evidence or to delay our discovery of the final secret. This theft is not incidentally is part of the murderer's plan. Lady Worthington's face fell. The journal. It contained Sir Edmund's notes on the shipment irregularities. Without it, we cannot confirm the identity of the person who bribed the courier. Inspector Mallory jotted furiously. Do you suspect one of the guests? We must consider. All present, Poirot replied. But first, I wish to examine the landing again. He led us quietly to the staircase. The morning light revealed a fresh scuff on the fourth riser where the paint had been disturbed again. A small smear of ink marked the edgier black, almost glossy stain. Poirot crouched and ran his finger through the ink. This is the same ink used in Lady Worthington's handwriting. He held up the smear to the light. Yet I find contradictory evidence. A fragment of yellow ribbon caught in the wood grain identical to the sash worn by Miss Vale. Miss Vale, standing nearby, glided forward. Monsieur, that ribbon came from my dress at the supper. I must have brushed against the step. Poirot regarded her serenely. Indeed, but the ink suggests someone left this deliberate trace, thinking to implicate your cousin. Now, we must inspect Miss Barlow's quarters where the maid's journal was kept. We ascended to the servants' wing, where the corridors were narrower, the walls plain plaster. Miss Barlow met us in her tidy room, a small cot, a wardrobe, and a wooden writing table. The table was clear, save for an open drawer that should have held her journal. Miss Barlow's eyes welled. It was here, monsieur. I wrote my observations, each night notes on the household and any oddities. I kept it for my own account, not anticipating, not this. Poirot inspected the drawer. Hastings, bring the tray of artifacts from the crate. I hurried down to retrieve the velvet-lined tray. Returning, I handed it to Poirot, who examined each compartment by lamplight. He laid out every item with meticulous care. The gilded chalice, the ivory figurine, the parchment siege was exactly as before, save for one unexpected intrusion, a small steel letter opener. Its blade engraved with Sir Edmund's initials, but stained faintly with ink. Poirot held it up. The very implement used to open Lady Worthington's letters, evidently to pry into Miss Barlow's journal and the safe. He placed it on the table. Notice the blade's subtle curvet matches the eyebrow of this landing step, where the ribbon and ink were found. Inspector Mallory frowned. But the letter opener belongs to Sir Edmund. How would anyone else procure it? Poirot tapped the handle. It was stolen from the desk during the chaos of last night's revelation. Whoever took it then used it to remove the journal and letter covertly. All eyes turned to Colonel Grantham, who stiffened. I had no reason to steal the journal. Poirot's gaze remained impassive. Yet the journal contained Sir Edmund's private thoughts, his doubts about Lady Worthington's involvement in the shipments. Miss Barlow's journal held her noted observations, witness accounts of whispers and footsteps. The missing letter detailed a final rendezvous. Whoever controls these documents controls the narrative. Lady Worthington stepped forward. Monsieur, perhaps I can help. I remember seeing Miss Barlow's diary on the table last evening, but I also saw Colonel Grantham near her quarters. Grantham's eyes flared. Madame, I passed that way only to check on the supplies. Miss Vale interjected. Voice cool. I watched the colonel depart the hallway with something under his arm wrapped in a cloth. Inspector Mallory's pen halted. "Is that true, sir?" Grantham swallowed. I carried a shawl Lady Worthington dropped in the hall." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "A plausible explanation, except the shawl in question bears floral embroidery, not plain cloth, and the fragment caught on the step is plain wool." He held up the scrap of ribbon again. "Miss Vale, you maintain that ribbon matches your sash butt. The cloth under the safe's door is identical to Colonel Grantham's uniform lining." Grantham's composure cracked. "My uniform lining is dark green satin. It would not leave a woolen fragment." Poirot nodded curtly. "Precisely." He turned back to Lady Worthington. "You admit to returning to the study for the spectacles, but beyond that, you withheld your presence there when you retrieved this letter." He produced the envelope. "Why, madam?" Lady Worthington's throat bobbed. I did not wish to alarm anyone until I understood its meaning. I intended to keep it private until I could show it to Sir Edmund." Poirot's eyes softened. Briefly, then hardened. "Perhaps, yet you also had opportunity to seize or destroy evidence in the safe." Mrs. Danvers, standing at the doorway, spoke for the first time. "My lady wouldn't harm her husband. She only sought to protect him." Poirot regarded the housekeeper. "Madame Danvers, you were alone in this corridor after lights out, preparing linen. Did you notice anyone else?" Mrs. Danvers's face paled. "No one except the hush of the house." Poirot's lips curved in a rare smile. "Excellent. The truth lies in absence as much as presence. The thief sought darkness and secrecy." He folded his hands. "We have recovered the journal and key found, concealed in Colonel Grantham's carriage, wrapped in plain cloth." Grantham's shoulders slumped. "I borrowed the key to examine the safe, to protect Lady Worthington from scandal. I found the letter and took it to understand its intent. I never meant to harm anyone." Poirot nodded. "Your motives may have been honourable, but your actions obstructed our investigation. Nevertheless, you are not our murderer, only the desperate guardian." He turned to me. "Hastings, make ready for tomorrow's gathering. We have uncovered a secondary crime that narrows our field. Soon, the final confrontation." As I left the library, I glanced back at Poirot's silhouette against the hearth. The stolen documents had been retrieved, but a deeper secret still lurked beneath the peeling paint and whispered threats. The stage was set for the next act where the true culprit would be forced from the shadows. Chapter 9. Hidden Connections, the morning after the secondary theft. A tense stillness lay over Greyford Manor. Soft light pooled on the drawing-room's polished floorboards as Poirot gestured for us all to take our places once more. The chairs, arranged in a semicircle around a small table, bore fresh documents, account ledgers, and the recovered journal entries. One by one, our suspects filed in. Lady Worthington, Miss Vale, Colonel Grantham, Mr. Shapon, and even Mrs. Danvers, summoned as a witness. Poirot rose, holding aloft the recovered maid's journal. "Mies Amos," he began, "we have now access to our victim's private thoughts, to the letter intended for Sir Edmund, and to Miss Barlow's observations. These writings reveal relationships and grudges hidden from view. Today, we map the web that binds you all together." He placed the journal on the table and opened to a page dated 5 days prior. Reading aloud, he said, "Sir Edmund's temper has grown darker since his marriage. He blames Lady Cecilia's family for financing his ventures. Miss Vale maintains a cold courtesy, but her loyalty hides a simmering resentment. Looked up, Miss Vale. What prompted this entry? Miss Vale bristled, but did not shrink. Sir Edmund confided in me that he regretted involving my family's fortune. He called me a prudish moneylender after I suggested more conservative investments. She folded her hands. I did not hide my displeasure, but I never sought to harm him. Poirot nodded. Indeed. Yet you and Lady Worthington share financial interests in these antiquities. A partnership fraught with familial expectations. He tapped a ledger. Observe here, Lady Worthington guaranteed a loan against Sir Edmund's collection. When a crate went missing, her credit was jeopardized. Lady Worthington's fingers trembled. I signed that guarantee to support my husband. I never intended to place him in jeopardy. Of course, Poirot said. But consider the strain upon your marriage, exacerbated by Colonel Grantham's presence. He turned to the Colonel. You and Lady Worthington served together in Egypt, did you not? The Colonel's face flushed at the mention. Years ago, during the campaign, we shared long nights discussing duty and honour. He paused, then met Lady Worthington's gaze. Cecilia, you remember how close we were? Lady Worthington's lips pressed together. You were a friend in dark times, but our friendship ended when Edmund returned. A flicker of pain crossed her eyes. Poirot folded his hands thoughtfully. Indeed, Colonel, you envied your friend's domestic happiness, yet you remained cordial when you learned of his financial troubles. He leafed through recovered letters. My dear Henry, this letter from Lady Worthington to you speaks of gratitude and solace, but her tone shifts when she mentions Sir Edmund's secrecy. He read a line, he grows distant, hides things from me. The Colonel stiffened. She confided her fears. I sought to comfort her. Poirot placed the letter down and retrieved the recovered love letter intended for Sir Edmund, bearing the midnight rendezvous message. He passed it to Mr. Chopin. Chopin, this letter was written in haste. Its paper matches the journal's pages. You market items on parchment of that quality. Chopin's brow furrowed. I had no reason to write this, nor did I wish to lure Sir Edmund anywhere, but someone did, Poirot pressed. Someone who knows both your trade and the manner intimately. He looked at Mrs. Danvers. You handle all linens, parchments, and keys. Yet you claim to have heard nothing during the theft. Mrs. Danvers's voice was quiet. I work in the linen room. I do not move about the study nor the servants' quarters at night. Poirot nodded, turning to the recovered journal entry from Miss Barlow. He read. He spoke in whispers to Lady Worthington outside her boudoir. I heard her voice plead, then silence. He held up the journal. Miss Barlow noted secret conversations between mistress and maid. Miss Barlow, flushed and clutching her apron, whispered, My lady asked me to bring her papers. A confidential matter. Poirot's gaze held Lady Worthington. What papers, madam? Lady Worthington's breath caught. A letter from my late father thought to show it to Sir Edmund. It concerned my inheritance. Poirot's keen eyes drifted to Colonel Grantham. And did you know of this inheritance, sir? The Colonel swallowed. I saw the letter once, at Lady Worthington's request. She asked me to confirm a clause in her father's will. Indeed, Poirot said, and therein lies a trifling discrepancy. The inheritance was designated for Lady Worthington alone, yet the loan guarantee used those funds as collateral. He tapped a ledger line. Someone manipulated her father's will, perhaps removed a clause so that the inheritance would serve a broader purpose. Who stood to benefit? He paused, surveying the group. Miss Vale, you would aid your cousin financially, yet you stood to lose your own inheritance if those funds were diverted. Miss Vale's eyes snapped. I would never betray her. Still, Poirot murmured, you possess the skill to alter documents. You trained in archiving. Your father's estate. Miss Vale recoiled. Monsieur, I swear. Poirot did not flinch. He took up the recovered merchant's letter from the crate's parchments. Observe these additions in a different hand comments on value. Handwriting identical to Lady Worthington's. He held it aloft. Why would you amend the merchant's letters, madame? Lady Worthington's face blanched. I was afraid of forgeries. I added notes to guide Sir Edmund. A plausible explanation, Poirot conceded. Yet you also replaced the crate seal, concealed the journal, and removed the final letter. She bowed her head. I panicked. I thought I could preserve my family's reputation without causing harm. Poirot folded his arms. Then consider the bond between Colonel Grantham and Lady Worthington, compassion born of old comradeship, than between Chopin and Sinclair over the antiquities, and between Miss Vale and the family's finances. Each of you shares a hidden tie to Sir Edmund's plans. He tapped the recovered letter opener. This implement passed through each of your hands, whether in close quarters with the crate, the safe, or the servants' quarters. He paused, eyes sweeping the room. Yet the true connection lies in the final document, the note beneath the stairs. It references arrogance and envy. Arrogance fits Colonel Grantham's military pride. Envy fits Chapin's financial ambitions. Betrayal matches Miss Vale's familial resentment, and desperation matches Lady Worthington's fears. He leaned forward. But only one of you mastered the entirety of these connections' motive, opportunity, and intimate knowledge of the manner. He ran a fingertip along the recovered stairwell note. Envy points to you, Mr. Chapin. Arrogance points to you, Colonel Grantham. Betrayal points to you, Miss Vale. Desperation points to you, Lady Worthington. Yet the phrase blood flows where arrogance meets envy suggests a meeting of two motives. A hush fell. Chapin's face paled. Grantham's jaw clenched. Miss Vale trembled. Lady Worthington's shoulders sagged. Poirot's eyes glinted. We shall see whose combined motive and opportunity align perfectly, he said quietly. For now, reflect on the hidden connections that have been laid bare. Tomorrow we pursue the psychological confrontation, but rest assured our net draws inexorably tighter around the murderer's heart. As the suspects dispersed, I lingered. By Poirot's side, his gaze remained on the scattered documents. The connections are many, I said softly, yet only one thread ties them all together. He nodded, eyes distant. Patience, Hastings. The little grey cells assemble the mosaic in time. Each connection is a tile. Soon the final image will emerge. And with that, he rose to review the recovered journal once more. The fragments of hidden connections converging toward the moment of revelation. Chapter 10. Poirot's secret clue. I found Hercule Poirot in the billiard room just before dusk, seated at the long green table with the recovered journal and ledger strewn before him. The ebony cues rested in their rack, and the ivory balls lay cold and untouched. Poirot's face was serene, yet his eyes burned with the intensity of discovery. Mon ami, he said without turning, consider the chronology of events this past week. We have clues aplenty, but one tiny inconsistency has eluded us until now. I leaned over the table. What inconsistency? He tapped a finger against a ledger page dated October 6th. observe the shipping record. The entry for the expedited surcharge bears two distinct inks, one dark sepia, one nearly black. Yet the sepia entries correspond to Sir Edmund's regular handwriting. The black appears later, added in haste. I peered at the page. I sits as if someone supplemented the ledger after the fact. Exactly, Poirot murmured. But note the penmanship. The black ink swirls with flourishes more extravagant than Sir Edmund's staid script. Compare it to this recovered love letter. He held up the midnight note. And you see the same sweeping loops on the capital T and the trailing tail of the Y. I took the letter, studying its ornate flourishes. You're suggesting the surcharge was entered by the same hand that wrote the midnight note? Poirot smiled. Ah, but there is more. The surcharge entry is time-stamped at 3:15 p.m. Inspector Mallory's own watch indicates the courier delivered the crate at 6:30 p.m. 3 hours discrepancy. Who adjusted the ledger at mid-afternoon to show earlier authorization? I frowned. Someone desperate to establish an alibi for the shipping fee, someone who needed to prove that surcharge was applied before dinner, not after. Poirot nodded. And that someone is intimately familiar with Sir Edmund's desk and private accounting where the ledger is kept, who has unsupervised access to his office besides Lady Worthington and the butler. Mrs. Danvers, I said. Slowly, she arranges the study every morning, dusts the ledgers. Precisely, Poirot said. Yet the handwriting does not match her sturdy hand. It is too refined, too decorative, more akin to a lady's handwriting, and Lady Worth. Known sample shows similar ornamentation. He produced a letter from her late father's will and held it beside the ledger entry. The script on both bore the same distinctive curl on the letter L and the looped descender on the G. I stared. So Lady Worthington altered the ledger herself. On the surface, yes, Poirot agreed. But why disguise it as Sir Edmund's entry? To conceal her involvement in the surcharge, thus hiding her financial stake in the shipments. Yet why not simply deny the surcharge? Because she required documentary proof to placate Colonel Grantham's demands. He leaned back, eyes closed. For a moment, but there is yet another layer. The ink itself. The ledger's black ink contains traces of an unusual pigment verdigris, indicative of copper salts. This pigment is found only in the green-tinted ink popular among military officers, notably Colonel Grantham. My eyebrows rose. Colonel Grantham's ink. So someone used the Colonel's ink to forge Lady Worthington's handwriting too. Clever by half. Poirot tapped the table. A deliberate misdirection. Implicate Lady Worthington, yet draw suspicion upon the Colonel. But the true author is neither. The criminal forged 3 separate hands to create a tapestry of deceit. I ran a hand through my hair. Who, then, when, what was the purpose of backdating the surcharge? To establish that the crate was officially dispatched before Sir Edmund's dinner meeting with Dr. Sinclair. Poirot replied, thus eliminating Sinclair's suspicion that the missing shipment was tampered with. In truth, the crate never left the grounds. It was held here, in the Manor's storeroom, until after dinner. I recalled the storeroom inspection. The crates there were numbered, but we overlooked one unmarked chest. Poirot smiled. Yes, one modest chest concealed beneath sacks of linen, bearing no seal. It contained the genuine shipment, while the tampered crate sat in the study, ready to be used as false evidence. I gasped. So the murderer orchestrated a swap, held the real artifacts here, and set up the study crate to implicate Sinclair. First, then meander suspicion to Lady Worthington and the Colonel. Brilliantly executed, Poirot said, admiration in his tone. But the final move was flawed. The murderer forgot that Sir Edmund often kept a personal diary, a slim volume we found missing. That diary recorded his intended confirmation of the surcharge, and he would have signed it himself upon verifying the courier's bribe. Poirot stood and retrieved a small, leather-bound book from his pocket. Here it is, Hastings, Sir Edmund's diary, concealed within Miss Barlow's journal during the secondary theft. He wrote this entry at 6:45 p.m. on October 6th. The surcharge is in place. Henry is satisfied. Sinclair's concerns quell. All is arranged. I open the diary and read the line. So the surcharge was applied before dinner and Sir Edmund noted it himself, contradicting the forged 3:15 p.m. entry. Poirot closed the diary. This was Sir Edmund's secret confirmation, tested by his own hand. The murderer realized the diary's importance and stole Sir Edmund's writing sample to forge the ledger entry, then attempted to destroy or conceal the diary. But they could not anticipate that Miss Barlow would hide it in her own journal for safekeeping. A chill ran through me. So Mrs. Danvers, Lady Worthington, and the Colonel were red herrings bred by a clever forger. But whose motive encompasses all these manipulations? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Consider who benefits most, not Sinclair, whose reputation was briefly sullied, not Chopin, whose profits were sidestepped, not Grantham, whose pride bruised, and not Lady Worthington, whose inheritance and marriage balanced precariously. He paused and tapped his chest. Rather, look to the one who sits quietly, orchestrating from behind the scenes, Miss Eleanor Vale. She oversaw the family estate's finances and handled the will's drafting. She has both funds and expertise in forgery. Her resentment toward Sir Edmund's use of her family's money provided ample motive. I stared at Miss Vale's elegant figure just beyond the doorway, her back to us, as she examined the recovered artifacts on display. She's the only suspect with intimate knowledge of the ledger, the study, the will, and the family finances, plus the ability to forge multiple hands. Poirot nodded. And observe how she always positioned herself near the ledger and Sir Edmund's desk during our inquiries under the guise of familial concern. He turned to me and lowered his voice. The secret clue is not the surcharge itself, but the diary entry that Sir Edmund wrote. That, Hastings, is the key. The diary belongs to him, and its presence here proves he verified the surcharge honestly. He looked toward the door. Now, my friend, we prepare for the confrontation. Miss Vale has unwittingly revealed her motive and provided us with the means by which she manipulated documents. Tomorrow we shall see if her little grey cells can withstand the weight of her guilt. As I left the billiard room, the echo of Poirot's words reverberated in my mind. The secret clue had emerged from the most innocuous of sources, a simple diary entry, yet it cut through the web of lies like a surgeon's scalpel. The true culprit's identity now lay within our grasp, and the final act would bring the long chain of deceptions to its inevitable end. Chapter 11. Tensions rise by the following evening. The atmosphere within Greyford Manor had grown taut, as though the very air carried the weight of unspoken accusations. In the drawing-room, candles flickered against the damask walls, their light catching on anxious faces. The suspects, Lady Worthington, Colonel Grantham, Mr. Chapin, Mrs. Danvers, and Miss Vale were gathered once more under Poirot's watchful gaze. Poirot rose from his chair, folding his hands behind his back. Ms. Amos, we have uncovered our secret clue, demonstrating how our culprit orchestrated each forgery and misdirection. Yet the web is not fully drawn. Tonight we allow tensions to rise naturally, observing who cracks under pressure. He turned to Lady Worthington. Madam, you have suffered greatly these days. Pray, tell us how your relationship with Sir Edmund has fared since these events began. Lady Worthington smoothed her skirts, her voice wavering. Our marriage was built on trust and partnership. Yet the revelations of financial deceit, no matter who committed them, have shaken me. I find myself questioning every glance, every word. Colonel Grantham cleared his throat. Cecilia, you know my loyalty remains. But I too feel betrayed, my years in Egypt clouded by involvement in these intrigues. I cannot bear to see you in pain. Lady Worthington's eyes flicked to her cousin, Miss Vale. Eleanor, you have remained dutiful, yet I sense reproach in your silence. Do you trust me? Miss Vale's lip curled imperceptibly. Trust, dear Cecilia, is earned. I have given mine freely, but it grows thin when secrets multiply. A hush fell. Mrs. Danvers, pale and rigid, shifted from foot to foot. Poirot observed each subtle tremor. He turned to Mr. Chapin. Maurice, your reputation in the auction world has suffered much rumor. You have blamed forgeries on Sinclair, Lady Worthington, and now even Colonel Grantham. How do you defend yourself? Chapin's fingers drummed on his knee. I acted only to protect my livelihood. If Sir Edmund's collection proved a sham, I would be ruined. Yet I harbor no ill will toward him now, only frustration at being caught in this maelstrom. Poirot's gaze pierced him. Frustration, yes, but at what cost? He let the silence stretch, allowing the unease to settle deeper. Suddenly, a sharp cry echoed down the corridor. Miss Barlow entered, breathless. In her hands she clutched a crumpled scrap of paper. It's from Sir Edmund's journal, she exclaimed. A new entry dated just before his death was found beneath his pillow. Poirot strode forward to take the paper, smoothing it out. In neat script appeared the final lines. If they discover the tampering, all will be lost. I must confront the traitor alone at midnight. A collective gasp filled the room. Lady Worthington's hand flew to her throat. He meant to confront someone alone at midnight. Who did he intend to meet? Colonel Grantham's face turned ashen. It could have been any of us, his closest associates. Miss Vale's expression remained unreadable, but her fingers tightened around her chair's arm. Poirot nodded slowly. This entry confirms Sir Edmund's fears and his knowledge that betrayal lay within these walls. But note, he did not name his betrayer. He planned to meet them in the shadow of the stairwell. He held the paper aloft. Thus, the final rendezvous was to be under the peeling paint, the very spot where his blood was concealed. Our murderer led him there under false promise. Poirot folded the note. Now, tensions shall rise among you. Accusations will fly. Alliances will shift, and true motives will emerge. Observe carefully. He turned first to Colonel Grantham. Sir Henry, did you know of Sir Edmund's plan to meet someone at midnight? Grantham's jaw tightened. I saw him pacing the corridor past the study at 11. He seemed agitated. I offered to accompany him, but he refused. His voice dropped. He said it was a matter of personal trust. Lady Worthington's eyes blazed. He sounded panicked, like he feared you might overhear. Grantham recoiled. Me? Why would he fear me? He blamed you for questioning his methods. Lady Worthington shot back. Miss Vale interjected, voice cool. Or perhaps he feared me, my knowledge of his ledgers and forgeries. Leaned forward. Enough. We each have reasons to despise Sir Edmund, yet not one of you speaks with sorrow, only regret for your own perishables. Mrs. Danvers trembled. Please cease this bickering. Sir Edmund was my master, gentle and just. He would never have harmed any of you. Poirot raised a hand. Silence. He closed his eyes briefly, steepling his fingers. When he spoke again, his voice was soft but firm. The final piece falls into place not by accusation, but by observation of reactions. He addressed Lady Worthington. Madam, you wept for your husband's death. Yet when Sir Edmund wrote of confronting the traitor, you displayed only fear for your reputation. Your tears were for your fortune, not your marriage. Her lip trembled. You misjudge me, monsieur. Poirot inclined his head. Perhaps, and yet you removed documents, altered ledgers, and concealed letters, all to protect yourself. He turned to Colonel Grantham. Sir Henry, your military pride forbade you to bow to debt. But when Sir Edmund delayed repayment, you threatened him. Your callousness borders on the mercenary. The colonel's face reddened. He left me no choice. Poirot's gaze shifted to Mr. Chapin. Maurice, your ambitions blinded you to any man's suffering. You would sacrifice Sir Edmund's life rather than see your profits dwindle. Chapin shook his head. I have remorse, but not guilt. Finally, Poirot looked to Miss Vale. And you, Eleanor, you served your family first. You managed the finances, you handled the will, you orchestrated the forgeries. You envied the life Sir Edmund led with his art, yet despised his command of your family wealth. Miss Vale's composure cracked. She rose, her voice trembling with anger and sorrow. Yes, I did all these things. I altered the ledger to protect my cousin's interest. I removed letters to spare her pain, and I hid the journal to prevent scandal. But I did not kill Sir Edmund. The room fell silent. Even Mrs. Danvers seemed to hold her breath. Poirot nodded gravely. You speak truth in that, Miss Vale. Yet your envy and desperation provided motive, and only you possessed the knowledge to engineer every aspect of this crime. Miss Vale's shoulders slumped. Then tell me, monsieur, who did kill him? Poirot's eyes glinted. The traitor Sir Edmund intended to confront at midnight. He never arrived. His gaze flicked to Colonel Grantham. Sir Henry offered to accompany Sir Edmund. You refused, yet you lingered within hearing range. The colonel bristled. I did not kill him. Poirot turned to Lady Worthington. And you, Lady Cecilia, had motive to silence the final letter, yet you stayed in your chambers at the crucial hour. Lady Worthington's voice was barely audible. I was too unwell to move. Poirot faced Chapin. You were in the shadows outside the study. You had the letter opener and the knowledge of the stairwell's concealment. Chapin swallowed. I confess nothing. Poirot glanced at each in turn, then folded his hands. The pressures of guilt have caused each of you to crumble or to lie about your actions. But only the murderer maintained composure when I revealed Sir Edmund's diary entry. He took a step back. Observe again the faces before me. One remains as composed as ever. His gaze settled on Mrs. Danvers. The housekeeper, pale and trembling, shrank beneath his stare. Poirot broke the silence. Madame Danvers, you claim loyalty to Lady Worthington and her husband. Yet you had the unique opportunity, access to servants' quarters, to the study, to Miss Barlow's journal. You had motive devotion to Lady Worthington, wanting to protect her from scandal, even at the cost of another's life. Mrs. Danvers's eyes welled with tears. No, no. I only sought to safeguard them, never to kill. Poirot's voice was gentle. You believed Sir Edmund's discoveries would ruin Lady Worthington. In your devotion, you led him to the stairwell under false pretenses, concealed the blood, removed the final note, and forged documents to mislead the investigation. You thought your actions justified. Her shoulders collapsed. I loved my lady. I would do anything for her. Poirot nodded, eyes softening. And yet, in doing so, you committed the ultimate betrayal. As Mrs. Danvers's sobs filled the room, Poirot turned to Inspector Mallory. Inspector, I believe our case is complete. The net had closed. In the hushed aftermath, each suspect understood that the tensions raised and the secrets uncovered had revealed the true culprit. The devoted housekeeper whose shadowed loyalty became the deadliest deception of all. Chapter 12. The confrontation. The late autumn dusk seeped through the tall windows of the grand salon, gilding the velvet drapes and casting elongated shadows across the parquet floor. Poirot stood before the assembled household staff and principal suspects, his posture as still and deliberate as a statue, his moustache bristling with anticipation. Mise Amos, he began, his voice calm yet resonant. We have witnessed your motives, uncovered your alibis, and observed how each of you has been touched by fear and grief. Yet only one among you carried out the deed beneath the flaking stairwell paint. He paused, letting the silence settle like a shroud over the room. Now, I shall apply a measure of pressure so precise that the guilty will betray themselves with the smallest slip. He turned to Mrs. Danvers, who stood near the hearth, her hands clasped before her, her grey uniform immaculate. The housekeeper's face was a calm mask, but her dark eyes flickered with unease. Monsieur Danvers, Poirot began, using her formal name. You have claimed unwavering loyalty to Lady Worthington. You professed that your actions were intended to protect her fortune and reputation. Yet we know you led Sir Edmund to the stairwell under false pretenses. Tell me, where did you obtain the knowledge of that hiding place? Mrs. Danvers's back stiffened. I only followed the instructions in the letter he discovered. The one warning blood flows where arrogance meets envy. I thought it meant the stairwell was significant. Poirot's grey eyes narrowed. Indeed, but how did you know? To conceal the letter beneath the peeling paint. That information came from Sir Edmund's own words in a private journal, never shared with the staff. He stepped closer, folding his arms. You told me you never entered the study after dinner, yet removed documents from the safe. How did you learn of the safe's hidden compartment? Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. She glanced at the recovered diary, sealed once more on the side table. I observed the safe being opened for our interviews, she said, her voice quavering. I saw the compartment left ajar. Poirot inclined his head slowly. A plausible account. It not for the fact that the safe was locked immediately after our second interview, and only Lady Worthington holds the key. He nodded towards Cecilia, who sat rigidly in her chair. Yet the key went missing that same night. With deliberate calm, Poirot retrieved the key from his waistcoat pocket and displayed it. Found concealed in the lining of your uniform. Madame Danvers, wrapped in the cloth matching the fragment we discovered on the stair. A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. Mrs. Danvers's face blanched. Her fingers clutched at her apron strings. Poirot continued, turning his attention to the servants standing near the door. I asked the staff about movements in the corridor after lights out. Miss Barlow reported nothing, yet you, Madame, are the only one tasked with preparing linens until the early hours. He paused, then produced the final slip of parchment. "And you tore this note from Sir Edmund's journal after his demise, knowing its warning would be discovered beneath the stairs." He flicked the parchment toward Mrs. Danvers. It fluttered to the floor at her feet. "You intended it as warning that could be blamed on another, but you did not account for Miss Barlow's vigilance." Tears sprang to Mrs. Danvers's eyes. She took a tremulous step forward. "Monsieur Poirot, I only wished to keep my lady safe. Sir Edmund's discoveries, they would ruin her." She glanced at Lady Worthington, who stared back in shock. He found letters proving Lady Cecilia's inheritance was used as collateral. He planned to expose her family's finances at the dinner table. "I could not allow that disgrace." Poirot regarded her with quiet intensity. "So you lured him to the stairwell under the pretext of a secret meeting, knocked him unconscious, though you grant yourself mercy by insisting it was a fall, and concealed his blood to make it appear accidental." His voice softened. "You believed you were acting in love, yet you crossed the boundary into murder." Mrs. Danvers's shoulders collapsed. She covered her mouth, stifling a sob. "Yes, I did. He must never have revealed my lady's secret. I thought I was saving her." "Your devotion cost a man his life," Poirot said, voice firm yet tinged with sympathy. "True loyalty never demands such a sacrifice." He turned to the assembled company. "You have heard her confession, though clothed in denial. Yet one final piece remains. Madame Danvers, why did you plant the forged surcharge entry in the ledger?" Mrs. Danvers lifted her tear-streaked face. "I forged the entry to delay the revelation that the crate never left the manor. I needed to implicate others, Sinclair, Lady Worthington, even the Colonel, so suspicion would drift until we could recover the diary and destroy it." Her lips trembled. "I thought if I controlled the narrative, no one would learn the truth." Poirot nodded. "A grave error. The little grey cells reveal all, even those hidden by the best-laid forgeries." He folded his hands. "Inspector Mallory, I believe you may take her into custody." As the constabulary officers moved forward, Lady Worthington rose to her feet, her violet gown swaying. She closed the distance to Mrs. Danvers and gently touched her arm. "You did this for me," she whispered, voice hushed with horror and pity. Mrs. Danvers lowered her gaze. "I betrayed him, but I would have betrayed the world to protect you, lady." Worthington's lips quivered. "You betrayed us all." Poirot stepped between them. "Let us depart with dignity. Justice must run its course." He looked once more at Mrs. Danvers. "May your actions teach that even the noblest intent must never excuse the gravest sin." As the officers led Mrs. Danvers away, the household stood in stunned silence. The confrontation had laid bare a devoted heart twisted by fear, and the weight of that revelation lingered heavily in the candlelit room. Poirot watched the housekeeper's retreating form, his expression unreadable, then turned to the remaining guests. "The murderer's confession closes this chapter," he said softly. "Yet in seeking justice, we must also seek understanding. Good night, Mies Amos." And with that, Hercule Poirot's little grey cells rested at last, having guided the investigator through their final and most delicate confrontation. Chapter 13. A desperate attempt to escape. A week had passed since Mrs. Danvers's arrest, and Grayford Manor thrummed with uneasy calm. The household, still reeling from betrayal, laboured to resume routine. Yet beneath the veneer of order, nervous undercurrents rippled. Late one autumn afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the channel's restless waves, An urgent summons arrived. Mrs. Danvers had fled custody. I found Hercule Poirot in the library, seated by the fire with his notebook open. His gaze was directed to the window, where the fading light painted the lawn in bruised purples and golds. "Hastings," he said, without surprise, "our housekeeper has made an attempt to escape. Inspector Mallory has sent word that her cell was found empty, the door unbolted, and her outer garments missing." I sat heavily. Impossible, the cell was locked, the guard posted. How could she vanish? Poirot tapped the table thoughtfully. A desperate soul will do what she must. Yet, I suspect she did not act alone. He rose, straightening his jacket. "Come. We go to secure the premises and prevent her disappearance from these grounds." We hurried through corridors now to familiar, passing portraits whose eyes seemed to follow us. The servants watched from doorways, their fear palpable. In the courtyard, Inspector Mallory greeted us, his expression grim. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "I found the door unlocked from the inside." The guard was unconscious just outside the lock, lying as if struck by a heavy object. He nodded toward a smear of blood on the cobblestones. Poor fellow, knocked cold. Poirot stooped to examine the smear. Indeed, blunt force, hastily applied. But consider. The housekeeper would know this guard's patrol schedule. She needed only a moment to slip past. Yet the gate was found latched, Mallory continued. She could not pass the lodge without a key. He frowned at Poirot. Her keys were confiscated at the jail. "So she borrowed another," Poirot murmured. He surveyed the courtyard. "Who among us holds the master key to every lock?" Mallory hesitated. "The butler, Mr. Grafton." I exchanged a glance with Poirot. Then she must have had assistance. Poirot nodded. "Find Mr. Grafton at once and secure the gate. Mrs. Danvers will not escape this night." As Mallory dispatched constables, Poirot and I ascended to the first floor. We passed Lady Worthington deep in thought, her violet dress whispering against the carpet. "She halted us, Poirot," she whispered. "I expected this." She spoke of one final act destruction of the incriminating evidence. "If she reaches the study, she will set the papers alight." Poirot inclined his head. "Thank you, madam. Your insight is invaluable." He offered his arm. "Come, Hastings. We must reach the study before she does." We quickened our pace, passing Miss Vale in the hallway. Her eyes burned with worry as she clutched a stack of ledgers to her chest. She pressed her lips tightly. Poirot nodded in acknowledgement and continued on at the study door. Mrs. Danvers loitered in the shadows, her uniform swapped for a dark cloak. In one hand she held a small hammer, in the other a taper. Her eyes shone with grim resolve. "Stop," Poirot called, stepping into the room. His voice was calm, but carried authority. "Madame, you are cornered." Mrs. Danvers's to me, then back to Poirot. "You don't understand, monsieur. I must destroy Sir Edmund's last writings, this diary, the letters. They will ruin Lady Worthington." She raised the hammer, as if to smash the glass-fronted cabinet where the diary lay, and poised the taper above a pile of parchment. Without hesitation, Poirot produced a slender cane and clicked it firmly upon the floor. "Mon Dieu, madame, the law stands between you and this destruction. I entreat you yield." Her breath came in ragged gasps. She glanced at the study windows, beyond which the darkening grounds beckoned. "I will not allow her name to be dragged through scandal." She took a step toward the diary. Poirot advanced slowly. "You seek to protect Lady Worthington's reputation, yet in doing so, you imperil your own soul. Look at your hands they fit for this violence. She hesitated, the hammer's head wavering. Then, in one swift motion, she flung the taper toward the cabinet's woodwork. The flame caught, licking at the gilt frame of the glass door. "Monsieur," I exclaimed, lunging forward to snatch the taper. Sparks scattered across the carpet. The cabinet's edge began to smoulder. Poirot seized Mrs. Danvers's wrist, wrenching the hammer from her grasp with a practiced twist. "Madame," he said, softly but firmly, "you are risking life and property." He disarmed her completely, dropping the hammer with a clatter. She collapsed into a nearby chair. The cloak pulled around her. Tears streamed down her face. I only wanted to protect her. Poirot knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "The little grey cells have already judged you, madame. It is not destruction you need, but justice, tempered with mercy." He rose, turning to Inspector Mallory, who had just arrived. "Inspector, take her into custody once more. See that she is held safely until morning." He indicated the guard now regaining consciousness at the far end of the corridor. Mallory nodded and moved forward to secure the housekeeper. Mrs. Danvers made no resistance as he applied the cuffs. Poirot lingered beside her, his voice quiet. "Madame, your attempt has only served to confirm your guilt. Yet your motives were of compassion. In that, you are not without honor, though you have erred gravely." As Mallory led Mrs. Danvers away, Poirot turned to me and surveyed the smouldering edge of the cabinet. "We have prevented the loss of evidence, Hastings. Now let us ensure the study is secure and that the diary and letters remain protected." I retrieved a small extinguishing bellows from a corner and doused the smoky embers. Poirot replaced the diary within its protective case and locked the cabinet. Outside the study window, the wind stirred the last of the autumn leaves. Poirot pressed his palm to the glass. "The greatest danger has passed. Yet I fear that this desperate act was but a prelude to deeper passions." I regarded him. "Do you believe someone else may intervene?" He shook his head slowly. "No, mon ami. The murderer's accomplice, though motivated by devotion, has now confessed indeed. The path to justice is clear." He turned, eyes reflecting the lamplight. "Come, Hastings. We must notify the household that all is secured." As we walked back through the silent corridors, I marveled at Poirot's calm amid chaos. The desperate attempt to escape had been foiled by acute anticipation, and the evidence stood intact. Yet I sensed that the final denouement still lay ahead, where loyalty, guilt, and justice would converge at last. Chapter 14. The final piece falls into place. The following morning dawned grey and drizzling, a perfect mirror of the manor's sombre mood. I found Poirot in the conservatory, seated among exotic ferns and withered orchids, his little grey cells clearly in overdrive. Before him lay a catalogue of photographs, dust samples, and the recovered artifacts from the tampered crate. "Hastings," he said, his voice crisp with excitement, "we stand at the threshold of revelation. Only one final piece remains, the connection between motive and opportunity, manifested in a single, telling detail." I joined him at the glass-topped table. "What clue have we overlooked, Hercule Poirot?" He tapped a photograph of the ivory figurine. With his slender cane, "This object, though seemingly minor, holds our last secret. The fracture in its base, which I noted was fresh, reveals a hidden compartment." He produced a small steel point and carefully levered the chipped edge, releasing a tiny spring. The figurine's midsection clicked open to reveal a folded slip of paper. My breath caught. A secret message. Poirot unfolded it with gloved hands. The parchment bore a single line, scrawled in an unsteady hand. The key lies where family and finance collide. He studied the note, eyes gleaming. A riddle, yet one we can solve. Which location in this house symbolizes both blood ties and monetary obligation? He leaned back, steepling his fingers. The drawing-room ledger cabinet where Lady Worthington's family seal guarded financial records. I nodded, but that cabinet has been searched twice. Indeed, Poirot said, rising. Yet no one thought to examine its flaw, and therein lies our clue. He swept a hand toward the polished oak floorboards. Note the faint scratch marks by the cabinet's base. Such marks suggest that an object was slid beneath. He knelt and pressed his ear to the cabinet. Listen. I heard a hollow reverberation. Poirot produced a slim metal probe and slipped it into a narrow seam at the cabinet's side. With a gentle push, a panel clicked inward, revealing a small, hollow space lined with crimson felt. Inside lay a leather-bound notebook stamped with Lady Worthington's crest. Poirot lifted it reverently. Sir Edmund's private memorandament, solely for Lady Worthington's eyes. He opened the notebook to the first entry, dated 6 weeks earlier. Cecilia's inheritance must remain intact. I shall transfer my debts to the Bond Street Fund. No one must suspect my true finances. Poirot flipped to the final page. If Eleanor learns of the fund's existence, she will feel betrayed. I must confide in her, or she may take matters into her own hands. I looked at him. So Sir Edmund intended to share the secret fund with Miss Valiette, feared her reaction to being excluded. Precisely, Poirot said, closing the book. This notebook reveals that the betrayal was not financial but personal, and that only one suspect possessed both the motive of exclusion and the knowledge to hide the notebook here. He handed the memorandum to me and pointed to each suspect in turn, escorted into the conservatory by Inspector Mallory, Lady Worthington, Miss Vale, Colonel Grantham, and Mr. Chupin. Their faces reflected curiosity, anxiety, and lingering guilt. Poirot cleared his throat. Mies Amis, we gathered today to lay bare the final secret Sir Edmund safeguarded his plan to protect his wife's inheritance and confide fully in his cousin. The notebook was concealed here to await that disclosure. He paused, letting the importance of the moment resonate. Yet someone discovered this plan before Sir Edmund could reveal it. That person felt slighted, believing themselves cheated out of trust and took matters into their own hands. I watched the suspects closely. Lady Worthington's hands trembled, though her expression was composed. Colonel Grantham's jaw tensed. Mr. Chapin shifted uneasily. Miss Vale's eyes narrowed, lips pressed in a thin line. Poirot held up the ivory figurine. This artifact's fracture provided access to the final clue. But who knew of the figurine's construction? Who understood its mechanism? He looked at Miss Vale. You, mademoiselle, as family archivist, arranged Sir Edmund's most unique pieces. You alone knew where to find this concealed riddle. Miss Vale's face paled. She shook her head. No, yes, I catalogued the shipment, but I did not kill him. Poirot nodded. You had motive, exclusion from the fund, wounded pride, and the skill to orchestrate forgeries. You had opportunity, free access to the study, knowledge of secret compartments, and a trusted position within the family. He turned to Inspector Mallory. Please, examine Miss Vale's gloves. The inspector produced a pair of tailored gloves from his satchel. Poirot inspected them, noticing faint red fibers caught in the stitching identical to the felt lining of the hidden compartment. "Observe," Poirot said, holding the glove beside the red felt. "These fibers were transferred when the gloves slipped beneath the cabinet to retrieve the memorandum." He then displayed a small vial of residue taken from the cabinet floor, a trace of shellac used to seal old ledgers mixed with candle wax of a pale yellow hue, matching the remnant on Mr. Chapin's lantern after our examination of the pantry. Chapin's face flushed. "I saw someone tampering, but I thought it was Sinclair's doing." Poirot's gaze fixed on Chapin. "Your misdirection drew suspicion to Sinclair, but you lacked the knowledge to open this figurine or hide documents in Lady Worthington's cabinet." He turned to Colonel Grantham. "Your military background taught you precision, but not craftsmanship, and you held no personal grievance against Sir Edmund's finances only, his broken promise to repay a loan." Finally, he faced Lady Worthington. "Your concern was preserving the inheritance, yet you were excluded from Sir Edmund's plan to confide in Eleanor. But you lacked the duplicity to orchestrate these multifaceted forgeries and secret-keeping." He stepped forward, gaze unwavering. "Thus, the only suspect possessing motive means an intimate knowledge of both family finances and the manor's hidden compartments is Miss Eleanor Vale." Miss Vale's composure shattered. Tears welled as she sank to her knees. "I never intended him to die," she sobbed. "I only wished to teach him a lesson, to force him to trust me as he trusted Cecilia." Poirot crouched beside her. "A lesson so cruel that it led to tragedy. You forged entries, planted notes, and lured Sir Edmund to his death. It was your envy-wounded pride that proved deadlier than any blade." He rose and addressed the room. The final piece of the puzzle, Hastings, was Sir Edmund's private memorandum within the family's own records. It revealed the betrayal of trust that drove our culprit to murder. Inspector Mallory stepped forward to place gentle cuffs on Miss Vale's wrists. As she was escorted away, Lady Worthington covered her face, and Colonel Grantham murmured a prayer. Poirot turned to me, the morning sun filtering through the glass panes. "My friend, the final piece has indeed fallen into place. We have uncovered the truth of both crime and motive." I exhaled deeply. A tragic betrayal, Hercule-born of pride and exclusion. He smiled sadly. "And now justice will be served. Come, Hastings, let us present the evidence to the authorities and bring this affair to its rightful conclusion." With that, Poirot gathered the recovered artifacts, the ivory figurine, and Sir Edmund's hidden memorandum, ready to close the case on the affair at Greyford Manor. The final piece had fallen into place, and the mosaic of human frailty lay fully revealed. Chapter 15. Outcome and justice there. Late afternoon sun slanted through the tall sash windows of Greyford Manor's drawing room, illuminating the gathered company as they assembled for the final reckoning. Inspector Mallory stood by the hearth, ledger and recovered artifacts arrayed on a small table beside him. Sir Edmund's hidden memorandum lay in a leather case at Poirot's elbow, its crimson lining reflecting the gravity of the moment. Poirot rose, his posture immaculate. "Mies, Amos, we have traced the crime from its inception through whispered warnings, forged ledgers, and secret compartments to its tragic culmination." He paused, eyes sweeping the room. "Now we deliver justice." He addressed Inspector Mallory. "Monsieur l'Inspecteur, would you care to recount the charges against Miss Vale?" Mallory stepped forward. "Eleanor Vale, You stand accused of the wilful murder of Sir Edmund Worthington on the night of October 6th, of tampering with financial records to conceal your jealousy, and of conspiring to misdirect this investigation through multiple forgeries. He glanced at the ledger. Evidence includes the forged surcharge entries, the hidden ivory riddle revealing your custody of the memorandum, and the unique glove fibers linking you to the final concealment. Miss Vale sat pale and composed, her hands folded in her lap. She lifted her gaze to Poirot, seeking perhaps a hint of mercy. Poirot inclined his head. You were the family archivist, entrusted with secrets, but your wounded pride and sense of exclusion drove you to orchestrate a deadly stratagem. He produced the ivory figurine, placing it on the table. This mechanism concealed the final clue, and only you possessed the knowledge to retrieve it. He turned to Lady Worthington and Colonel Grantham, seated nearby. Madame, sir, your testimonies were instrumental in exposing her motive and opportunity. Your forgiveness for Miss Vale's betrayal now rests with the Crown's courts. Poirot resumed, and you, Mr. Chapin, Miss Barlow, and Mrs. Danvezu, too, have suffered in this affair. Your loyalty, station, and compassion were tested by deceit. May your integrity endure. He then faced Miss Vale. Eleanor, you have heard the charges and the evidence. Do you wish to speak before we proceed? Miss Vale drew a trembling breath. She rose, her violet gown brushing the carpet. Hercule, I never meant for him to die. I only wished him to value my counsel, to share in the fortunes he claimed to protect. When he planned to expose my family's finances, I felt betrayed, so deeply betrayed that reason fled me. She closed her eyes. I am sorry, to you all, to him, and to myself. She sank back into her chair, overcome by remorse. Inspector. Mallory signalled to constables, who rose to escort her gently toward the Manor's carriage house, where she would await transport to London for trial. Poirot watched her depart, then addressed the remaining guests. Let this be a solemn reminder that the bonds of trust between spouses, friends, and family demand vigilance and care. When trust fractures, even the smallest grievance can yield tragic consequence. He folded his hands. Justice must now take its course. A hush fell as Lady Worthington rose, her bearing still regal amid sorrow. She approached Poirot. Monsieur, she said softly, you have restored Sir Edmund's good name and ours. How can we ever repay you? Poirot bowed gracefully. Your gratitude is payment enough, madam. May you find peace in truth. Colonel Grantham stepped forward, offering his hand. Hercule, your brilliance has spared us from further despair. Poirot shook his hand. And your steadfast loyalty preserved the honour of this house. As the guests dispersed, I lingered beside Poirot. Another case concluded, Hercule. Yet the cost has been great. He gazed toward the mantel, where Sir Edmund's portrait looked on. Indeed, Hastings, but justice answers the fall in silence. Sir Edmund's final wishes to protect his family's legacy shall now be honoured without shame. He turned to me, eyes soft. Come, mon ami, let us close this chapter and allow Greyford Manor to heal. Together we left the drawing room, the echoes of revelations and remorse lingering like a fading melody. Outside, the rain had ceased, and a pale rainbow arched over the misty garden's an emblem of hope rising from sorrow and of justice, at last. Fulfilled. Chapter 16. The revealed that evening, the guests reconvened in the grand ballroom of Greyford Manor, its crystal chandeliers casting prisms of light upon polished marble, The air was heavy with expectation, for Hercule Poirot had called them together for one final ceremony of revelation. All stood in a broad semicircle. Lady Worthington, Colonel Grantham, Mr. Shappan, Miss Barlow, and even Mrs. Pearson, the cook, brought to witness the truth she had unwittingly served as prop too. Poirot entered last, his little grey cells aflame with the culmination of their labours. In his hand he carried Sir Edmund's hidden memorandum, the leather-bound notebook, discovered behind the drawing-room cabinet. He paused on the dais, allowing the hush to deepen. "Mies Amos," he began, his voice clear, "we have presented evidence, heard confessions, and observed justice administered. Yet before you take your leave, I owe you the reconstruction of the crime's true sequence, the grand reveal of how and why our victim met his end." He placed the memorandum on an ornate lectern draped with emerald velvet. Sir Edmund Worthington, a man of impeccable taste and financial acumen, found himself encumbered by debts hidden beneath the glimmer of his antiquities trade. He devised a secret fund to protect his wife's inheritance, intending to share that confidence with his cousin, Miss Eleanor Vale. Poirot paused, eyes drifting among the gathered faces. His plan, however, would mortally wound Miss Vale's sensibilities, her pride and her unspoken belief that she, as family archivist, deserved full trust. He lifted the memorandum. On the night of October 6th, Sir Edmund penned his final entry. "If Eleanor learns of the fund's existence, she will feel betrayed. I must confide in her, or she may take matters into her own hands, driven by wounded pride." Miss Vale indeed took matters into her own hands. Poirot produced the ivory figurine, placing it on the lectern. She exploited her knowledge of this fragmentary unique piece whose base concealed a slip of paper. Under the guise of cataloguing, she pried it open and discovered the hidden riddle. The key lies where family and finance collide. Accepting that clue, she accessed the cabinet in the drawing-room and concealed Sir Edmund's memorandum. Therein, he paused to let the implications sink in. That act, seemingly innocuous, signified premeditation, yet the crime itself was more direct. Poirot tapped the glass case housing Sir Edmund's diary. At midnight, Miss Vale lured him to the stairwell beneath the flaking paint, under the pretext of a final discussion. There, she struck him with the butt of a hammer borrowed from the pantry, rendering him unconscious. His voice was steady, each word precise. Lady Worthington gasped. Colonel Grantham's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. Mr. Chapin's face drained of colour. Believing him dead, she concealed his blood beneath the painted riser, then replaced the ledger's entry with forgeries blending three distinct hands, Lady Worthington's and Colonel Grantham's, inked to misdirect suspicion. Poirot lifted a ledger page mounted on a board. Each flourish and alteration bore her deft script and knowledge of their handwriting, a trifecta of deception. He set the board down and turned to Mrs. Barlow. "Our maid first discovered the body at dawn and raised the alarm. Mrs. Danvers attempted her own misdirection afterward, but that was another's desperate act." Poirot's gaze returned to Miss Vale. "Your wound to Miss Vale's pride drove you to murder a man you believed an adversary, and in your belief you underestimated the power of the little grey cells." Miss Vale, pale and trembling, looked away. A silent tear tracked down her cheek. Poirot drew in a deep breath and stepped aside to reveal a small display: the forged surcharge entry, the recovered letter opener, the shard of flaking paint, and Sir Edmund's smashed spectacles, each numbered and labelled. "I present these artifacts as silent witnesses," he said. They chronicle how each move was made. The ledger change at 3:15 p.m. using Colonel Grantham's green-tinted ink mixed with Lady Worthington's handwriting, the concealment of the ivory riddle, the midnight assault under the guise of clandestine trust, and the final retrieval of Sir Edmund's diaries from Miss Barlow's quarters. He turned to Inspector Mallory. Monsieur l'Inspecteur, you may now take Miss Vale into formal custody. The evidence is irrefutable. At the word, 2 constables stepped forward, placing gentle hands on Miss Vale's elbows. She rose, dignity intact yet broken, and allowed herself to be led away without protest. Poirot faced the remaining company. Thus ends the affair at Grayford Manor. A tale of trust betrayed, of pride turned lethal, and of secrets concealed until the unmasking. He bowed slightly. I thank you all for your patience and your candour. Lady Worthington moved to Poirot's side, offering a trembling smile. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You have granted us closure. Poirot nodded. Madame, the truth, though painful, is the foundation of healing. He glanced at the dais. And now, Mies Amos, let us conclude with a moment of reflection upon Sir Edmund's memory, his passion for discovery, his devotion to family, and the tragic cost of his secrets. He lifted Sir Edmund's portrait, carried forward by a page, placing it on an easel beside the lectern. The company fell silent in reverence. Poirot's voice softened. Farewell, Sir Edmund Worthington. May you rest in peace, your legacy restored, and your family's name cleared of false suspicion. As the guests bowed their heads, a distant church bell tolled the hour. The final reveal complete, the path to justice now assured. Grayford Manor exhaled the breath it had held for too long and prepared to step into the dawn of truth. Chapter 17. Outcome and Justice. The chill of early winter wrapped Grayford Manor, as news of Miss Vale's conviction spread through the county. In Westminster Hall the following month, Eleanor Vale stood with bowed head as the court recorder read the verdict. Guilty of murder in the 1st degree. The judge pronounced a sentence of life imprisonment with hard labour and outcome tempered by her demonstrable remorse and the mitigating circumstance of her profound emotional betrayal. Lady Cecilia Worthington, accompanied by Colonel Grantham, attended the hearing in solemn support of justice. Though her cousin's fate pained her deeply, she understood that the law must be served. Maurice Chapin and Miss Barlow were present as character witnesses, attesting to Miss Vale's generally honourable nature. Even Mrs. Danvers, who had endured her own trial for obstruction of justice and attempted arson, appeared in the public gallery. Her eyes filled with tears for both Mrs. Vale and the Worthington family. Upon returning to Grayford Manor, Lady Worthington issued a formal statement to the local press. Sir Edmund Worthington's memory has been vindicated. Though the actions of a beloved cousin have cast a shadow over our family, the truth must prevail. We trust that justice, though stern, will foster healing. The press noted her dignified composure, her grief tempered by resolve. Colonel Granth, redeemed in society's eyes by his steadfast loyalty, assumed greater responsibility as honorary keeper of the estate's affairs. He oversaw the final audit of Sir Edmund's finances, ensuring the secret fund he had created was preserved intact for Lady Worthington's sole benefit. On Sir Edmund's birthday in December, the Colonel commissioned a small Gothic window in the family chapel engraved with Sir Edmund's motto, Fidelis in Arconis, faithful in secrets. In the days that followed, Grayford Manor itself became a place of quiet restoration. The great staircase was refinished, the flaking paint replaced, but a single riser was left untouched, its faded layers, preserved under a glass panel as a sombre reminder of the night that changed all their lives. Miss Barlow, now promoted to Lady Worthington's personal secretary, maintained meticulous records and oversaw the reorganization of the library, ensuring Sir Edmund's journals were locked in the newly installed safe accessible only by Lady Worthington and Colonel Grantham together. Mrs. Pearson, the Manor's cook, donated part of her Christmas turkey haul to the local infirmary, honouring the fallen guard who had saved Miss Vale's diary from destruction. The villagers, once wary of the scandal, came to view Greyford Manor with newfound respect. For the family's honesty and their willingness to confront betrayal head-on, on the first anniversary of Sir Edmund's death, Lady Worthington hosted a small memorial service in the chapel, attended by Colonel Grantham, Mr. Shappan, Miss Barlow, and Inspector Mallory. They each laid a single white rose upon the altar, symbolizing innocence lost and the enduring power of truth. Colonel Grantham delivered a brief eulogy. Edmund's life was defined by dignity, curiosity, and a steadfast love for those he held dear. Though tragedy endeavoured to silence him, his legacy endures in every act of justice and fidelity performed in his name. As the congregation sang a soft hymn, Lady Worthington pressed a final kiss to the facade of the preserved stairwell riser, her silent tribute to the man whose secrets nearly destroyed them all. Back in London, Miss Vale now. Eleanor Chapman, by decree of the court, wrote letters of apology to each survivor, seeking forgiveness she knew she did not deserve. In prison, she took to teaching fellow inmates to read and write, her meticulous skills serving a higher purpose at last. And so, justice was served. The guilty punished, the innocent exonerated, and the wounded given a chance to rebuild. Greyford Manor, forever marked by loss, embraced a future guided by honesty and resilience. In the quiet glow of candlelight each evening, Lady Worthington would light a single taper in Sir Edmund's study, a reminder that though secrets may tremble beneath paint and ledger, the light of truth endures beyond the darkest of nights. Chapter 18. The closing remark. The final embers of twilight glowed in the hearth of Greyford Manor's drawing room as the assembled few took their leave. Lady Cecilia Worthington stood by the window, gazing out at the frost-kissed gardens, her silhouette framed by the last lavender light of day. Colonel Grantham offered his arm in quiet companionship, and Miss Barlow hovered protectively at her mistress's side. Even Mr. Shappan lingered, his brows solemn, before stepping back to attend to the closing of the front hall doors. Hercule Poirot, his brilliant eyes reflecting the soft lamplight, addressed the small circle gathered once more, only for remained Lady Worthington, Colonel Grantham, Miss Barlow, and I, Captain Hastings, chronicler of this singular affair. Mrs. Danvers and Miss Vale had departed under guard. The shadow of their actions lingered still, yet the hard work of justice and reconciliation moved steadily forward. Madame Poirot began, inclining his head toward Lady Worthington. You have suffered loss and betrayal, yet you have met these trials with dignity. It is fitting that Sir Edmund's true legacy, the protection of your inheritance, and the preservation of familial trust has been restored. Lady Worthington offered a small, weary smile. I owe my peace to you, Monsieur Poirot. Without your perseverance, the truth might have remained buried beneath layers of artifice. Poirot brushed his moustache. Truth, madam, is like a candle. In the dark it may flicker, and its light may be obscured, but eventually it illuminates all. He turned to Colonel Grantham. And you, sir, stood by your friends and neighbours through fire and storm. Your steadfast support has been a bulwark against despair." The colonel bowed his head. "I sought only to honour Sir Edmund's memory and to aid Lady Cecilia in her hour of need." Poirot's gaze moved to Miss Barlow. "My dear mademoiselle, your keen observations and unwavering devotion to duty provided the spark that kindled our conviction. You remind us that courage may reside in the humblest of hearts." Miss Barlow blushed, lowering her eyes. "I only did what any honest servant would do." "Ah, but it was your honesty that shone where falsehood had taken root," Poirot said gently. He then fixed his gaze on me. "And you, mon ami Hastings, have borne witness to these events with loyalty and precision. Your willingness to follow me into the darkest corridors of Grayford Manor proved indispensable." I dipped my head. "It is always an honour to assist." "You, Hercule," Poirot smiled, the faintest glimmer of mischief in his eyes. "And now, Mies Amos, I shall take my leave. The wheels of justice have been set in motion. The innocent may heal, and the guilty face their due. As for me, I must return to London and tend to other puzzles waiting patiently for my scrutiny." He turned toward the tall French doors that led to the front hall. As he did, a hush fell over the chamber. The portraits of Worthington ancestors watched impassively, as if blessing this moment of closure. Poirot paused at the threshold, then looked back over his shoulder. "Permit me one final remark." He swept his hand in a gentle arc, encompassing the room and its inhabitants. "Life's mysteries, like artful puzzles, are composed of many pieces, some bright, some dark. The true work of detection is not only to expose the crime, but to understand the currents of human nature that drive us to deeds of heroism and horror alike." He stepped through the doorway, lantern in hand, and paused beneath the chandelier. Its crystals caught the glow, scattering a dance of light across the walls. "In the end," he said, voice rich with conviction, "we are bound by our choices. Let us choose honesty, compassion, and the courage to face our own reflections, lest we, to fall prey to the shadows within our hearts." With that, Poirot offered a final, bow exquisitely measured, elegantly restrained, and raised his cane. In salute, the echo of his steps faded as he made his way down the grand staircase, leaving us to the quiet warmth of the hearth and the soft crackle of the fire. Lady Worthington crossed to the mantel, where Sir Edmund's portrait now hung beneath the newly installed windows-coloured light. She placed a single white rose upon the mantelpiece, a gesture of remembrance and bittersweet farewell. Colonel Grantham joined her, offering his arm. Outside, the first stars glittered faintly through a clearing sky. Miss Barlow stood by the hearth, straightening the hearthrug, as if to restore order after the tumult. I lingered at the door, taking in the scene, a house scarred by tragedy, yet upheld by integrity and hope. As the last of us departed, the steady glow of the drawing-room lantern remained undimmed by the winter night. It stood as testament to Poirot's words, "Candle in the dark," a beacon of truth that would guide Grayford Manor and its inhabitants toward healing. And thus concluded the final chapter of the affair at Grayford Manor, a story of hidden motives, fractured trusts, and the enduring power of justice brought forth by one man's unrelenting faith in the little grey cells.